Rebecca "Becky" Frederickson was a 31-year-old woman living in San Antonio, Texas. She was known throughout her community for her warm personality and her incredible talent for baking. Becky owned and operated Sweet Treats, a popular local bakery that had become a staple in the neighborhood. Her shop was known for its delicious pastries, especially her famous chocolate chip cookies and pumpkin spice muffins, a trendy treat beloved by millennials everywhere. Becky had a loyal customer base, many of whom had been coming to her bakery since it first opened. Becky was married to Michael Frederickson, a 35-year-old financial advisor. They had been married for 5 years after meeting at a friend's wedding, and on the surface, their life seemed perfect. They lived in a cozy one-story home not far from the bakery and were well-liked in the community, with Becky often donating cakes and other baked goods to local schools and events, like the annual San Antonio Christmas Parade. However, in the months leading up to her death, Becky had been feeling a growing sense of unease. She noticed that Michael had become distant, often coming home late from work and showing little interest in their marriage even after Becky, who had always dreamed of starting a family, was diagnosed with endometriosis, which made it difficult for her to conceive. Despite these challenges, Becky remained hopeful. She threw herself into her work, often staying late at the bakery to perfect new recipes. In September 2019, Becky was preparing for the busy holiday season. She had just begun planning the bakery's Halloween-themed treats, which were always a big hit with customers. But even as she focused on her business, Becky couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong in her personal life. She tried to talk to Michael about her concerns, but he always brushed them off, leaving Becky to wonder what was really going on. Becky's friends and customers described her as sweet, generous, and hardworking. She was the kind of person who would go out of her way to help others, and her warm smile was a welcome sight to everyone who knew her. Her death would leave a void in the community that would be hard to fill. On September 15, 2019, at approximately 7:30 a.m., the lifeless body of Rebecca "Becky" Frederickson was discovered in the kitchen of her San Antonio home. It was a warm Sunday morning, and the city was just starting to wake up. Becky's neighbor, Karen Simmons, a 56-year-old retired schoolteacher, was the one who found her. Karen had noticed that Becky's bakery, Sweet Treats, hadn't opened on time that morning. This was unusual. Becky's bakery was almost always bustling with customers eager for her famous cookies and cakes. Concerned, Karen decided to check on Becky. She walked the short distance to Becky's home, which was just around the corner from the bakery. When she arrived, she found the front door slightly ajar, which immediately set off alarm bells. Becky was always careful about locking up, especially after a few break-ins had been reported in the neighborhood earlier that year. Karen hesitated but then pushed the door open and called out Becky's name. There was no answer. She stepped inside and noticed a strange silence. The house was neat and tidy, except for the kitchen. As Karen entered the kitchen, her heart sank. Becky was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. The rolling pin, which Becky always kept on the kitchen counter, was on the floor beside her, stained with blood. The sight was horrifying. The once warm and welcoming kitchen, where Becky had baked so many treats, was now a crime scene. Karen was in shock but managed to dial 911. Her hands trembled as she gave the dispatcher the address and explained what she had found. She stayed on the line until the police arrived, all the while trying to hold back tears. Karen later told investigators that Becky's face was so badly injured that she could hardly recognize her. When the police arrived, they found Karen standing outside, visibly shaken and in tears. She could barely speak, and the officers had to help her to a nearby bench to sit down. The neighborhood quickly buzzed with news of Becky's death, leaving everyone in disbelief. How could such a kind and gentle woman meet such a violent end? When the San Antonio Police Department received the 911 call on September 15, 2019, officers arrived at the scene within minutes. The responding officers were Surgeon Maria Diaz, a 42-year-old veteran with a reputation for being thorough and compassionate, and Officer James O'Meal, a 28-year-old who had only been on the force for 3 years but was eager to learn. They quickly secured the area, setting up yellow crime scene tape around Becky Frederickson's small single-story home. The quiet neighborhood, typically filled with the scent of fresh pastries from Becky's bakery, was now overtaken by the flashing lights of police cars and the hum of emergency radios. As they entered the house, the officers were struck by the eerie silence. The living room was untouched, with cozy furniture and framed photos of Becky's wedding day displayed on the walls. But as they approached the kitchen, the scene changed dramatically. The kitchen, Once a place of warmth and comfort was now a gruesome crime scene. Becky's body lay in the center of the room. Her blood spattered the white-tiled floor, and the rolling pin, a symbol of her love for baking, was lying nearby, covered in blood. Surgeon Diaz's experience kicked in as she began to assess the situation. The scene indicated a violent struggle. Chairs were knocked over, and a mixing bowl had fallen to the floor, its contents spilled out. Becky's apron was stained with blood, and her hands showed defensive wounds, suggesting she had fought hard for her life. Officer O'Meal took photos of the scene while Diaz carefully noted the details. The forensic team arrived soon after. Led by the team collected fingerprints, blood samples, and any other evidence that might help piece together what had happened. The medical examiner, Dr. Lillian Pang, a no-nonsense 55-year-old with decades of experience, arrived to examine the body. She noted that Becky had suffered multiple blunt force injuries to her head, and the time of death was estimated to be between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous evening. The brutality of the attack shocked everyone present, including the seasoned investigators. Outside, the news of Becky's death spread quickly. Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. Many of them knew Becky personally, having bought her baked goods for years. The sight of police cars and the knowledge of what had happened inside the house left the community in a state of shock and mourning. As the investigation continued, the police focused on gathering every piece of evidence they could find. They knew that the crime scene held the key to solving this brutal murder. They needed to find out who could have committed such a heinous act against a beloved member of the community. The investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder quickly turned its focus on her husband, Michael Frederickson. Michael, 35, was a well-known financial advisor in San Antonio. To his clients, he was the picture of professionalism, calm, dependable, and trustworthy. They have a strong reputation in the community, often seen at networking events and charity functions. However, behind closed doors, Michael was far from every woman's dream husband. He was completely different, angry with an insatiable sexual appetite his wife could never fulfill. He was a man of secrets, deeply unhappy with his life and marriage. In the days following Becky's death, investigators dug into Michael's personal life. They learned that the Fredericksons' marriage had been strained for quite some time. Becky's endometriosis diagnosis had not only shattered her dream of starting a family, but also placed significant strain on the sexual aspect of their relationship. Michael, who had once been an attentive and loving husband, grew distant and frustrated. He began spending more time at work and less time at home, often coming back late at night or even after unexplained absences of several days. Colleagues noticed that he seemed stressed, but Michael brushed off their concerns, saying it was just life stuff. The real shock came when police uncovered Michael's affair with Becky's own mother, Margaret Ruth Breedlove. Ruth, who had re-entered Becky's life only a few years earlier, was 48 and still possessed a charismatic charm and smoldering sexually her somewhat restrained daughter couldn't match. The affair had started as a harmless flirtation, but quickly escalated into something much more serious. Michael and Ruth had been secretly seeing each other for sex, even having sex on Becky's bed when she wasn't home. The affair shocked the investigation, painting a picture of a man caught between a troubled mother-daughter relationship and a tangled web of deceit. During his interrogation, Michael initially denied any involvement in Becky's murder. He maintained that he had been at the office late, working on a client's portfolio, and had come home to find Becky already dead. However, as detectives pressed him about his secret sexual relationship with Ruth, Michael's calm demeanor began to crack. He became defensive, insisting that the affair had nothing to do with Becky's death. But when detectives confronted him with evidence of his infidelity, including explicit text messages and naked pictures sent between him and Ruth, Michael's composure shattered. Police noted that Michael's behavior was suspicious, his answers were evasive, and he struggled to provide a clear timeline of his actions on the night of the murder. Investigators also found it odd that Michael showed little emotion when discussing Becky's death, often speaking about her in a detached manner as if she was just some dead person you saw on the news. Despite his attempts to distance himself from the crime, Michael's affair with Ruth provided a strong motive for murder. The pressure on Michael was mounting, and detectives were determined to get to the truth. As the investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder deepened, police turned their attention to Margaret Ruth Breedlove, Becky's 48-year-old mother. Ruth had a complicated history that raised several red flags for detectives. She had re-entered Becky's life just a few years earlier after spending decades living a free-spirited and often reckless lifestyle. Ruth had moved from Oakland, California, to San Antonio to reconnect with her daughter, but her arrival had brought more turmoil than healing. Ruth was a striking woman who had always enjoyed being the center of attention. Even in her late 40s, she maintained a youthful appearance and a sexually magnetic personality that drew people to her. After giving birth to Becky at the tender age of 17 and leaving her in the care of her own mother when Becky was just a child, Ruth had spent years drifting from one job to another and from one relationship to the next. She had worked as a house painter in Oakland, where she was known for her bold fashion choices and colorful personality. Ruth's life took a dramatic turn when she joined a cult known as the Sunshine Family in the late 1990s, a decision that led her to lose contact with Becky for nearly 2 decades. When Ruth finally resurfaced in Becky's life, it was clear that she had not changed much. She was still the same flirtatious, sexual attention-seeking woman she had always been, and she quickly became a disruptive force in Becky's marriage. Ruth openly flirted with Becky's husband, Michael, even going so far as to make out with him in front of her daughter. This behavior strained the new and already fragile relationship between mother and daughter. During her interrogation, Ruth was candid about her affair with Michael, admitting that sex she had been having with Michael was, quote, marvelous. She described the relationship as a passionate, all-consuming love affair that had given her a sense of purpose she had not felt in years. Ruth justified her actions by insisting that Michael was sexually unfulfilled in his marriage and that she was simply offering him the excitement and fulfillment he craved. To Ruth, the affair was not just a fling. It was a deep, soul-to-soul connection that she believed was meant to be. However, Ruth denied any involvement in Becky's murder. She claimed that she had been at home on the night of the killing, watching Real Housewives and sipping a glass of red wine. Her tone during the interrogation was defiant, almost as if she believed that her actions were justified. Detectives noted that Ruth showed little remorse for the affair and seemed more concerned about how the revelation of the relationship would affect her than about her daughter's death. Ruth's lack of empathy in her affair with Michael made her a strong suspect, but there was no direct evidence linking her to the crime. Despite her claims of innocence, investigators were not convinced, and they continued to scrutinize her every move. In the investigation of Becky Frederickson's murder, police also turned their attention to a third suspect, Danny La Culebra Hernandez Basco. Danny, 22, was a figure with a notorious reputation in San Antonio. Originally from Tamaulipas, Mexico, Danny had a long criminal record that included theft, assault, and drug-related charges. His nickname, La Culebra, which means the snake in English, was a reflection of his slippery, dangerous nature. Danny was known to be a rough and intimidating presence in the community. He had been spotted near Becky's bakery several times in the weeks leading up to her murder, leading to rumors that he was involved in some sort of criminal activity in the area. Witnesses reported seeing him lurking around the neighborhood, often dressed in dark clothing and keeping to the shadows. He was the kind of person who made people nervous, someone who seemed always to be on the edge of violence. When police brought Danny in for questioning, they were prepared for a difficult interrogation. Danny, however, surprised them by maintaining his innocence. He claimed he had nothing to do with Becky's murder and that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. According to Danny, he had been in the area to meet up with some old friends from his neighborhood who had recently immigrated to the United States, not to cause any trouble. He insisted that he had never even met Becky and had no reason to harm her. Throughout the interrogation, Danny's demeanor was defensive. He was angry and frustrated, lashing out at the detectives who questioned him. He accused them of targeting him because of his criminal past and his Mexican nationality, calling the investigation a witch hunt. Despite his protests, police remained suspicious of Danny. His violent history and proximity to the crime scene made him a person of interest. However, as the interrogation continued, it became clear that there was little evidence to tie Danny directly to Becky's murder. There were no witnesses who could place him at the scene at the time of the crime, and no physical evidence connected him to the murder. While his presence in the area was suspicious, it wasn't enough to charge him. Danny was eventually released, but police kept him under close surveillance, aware that his volatile nature and criminal background made him a potential threat. As the investigation into Becky Frederickson's murder dragged on without a clear suspect, frustration began to set in for the detectives. But on the morning of September 18, 2019, a breakthrough came when Margaret Ruth Breedlove made a shocking revelation that changed the course of the case. Ruth, during a follow-up interview with detectives, disclosed that she was pregnant, and the father was none other than her own son-in-law, Michael Frederickson. This revelation stunned the police. It added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web of relationships. Detectives knew that this revelation could be the key to understanding the motive behind Becky's brutal murder. The news of Ruth's pregnancy was a bombshell, suggesting that the affair between Ruth and Michael wasn't just a fling, but something far more serious. With this new information in hand, the police doubled down on their investigation. They decided to re-examine the crime scene and the evidence collected earlier, hoping to uncover any overlooked details. On September 20, 2019, 2 days after Ruth's confession, detectives revisited Becky's house, where the murder had taken place. Inside, the crime scene remained eerily untouched, a stark reminder of the violence that had occurred there. The detectives carefully combed through the area, focusing on the rolling pin that had been used as the murder weapon. Forensic experts reanalyzed the rolling pin, this time looking for any traces of DNA or fingerprints that might have been missed during the initial examination. Meanwhile, detectives also turned their attention to Michael Frederickson. Armed with the knowledge of Ruth's pregnancy, they began to put together a timeline of events leading up to Becky's murder. They learned that Michael had been increasingly anxious in the weeks before the crime, reportedly distancing himself from both his wife and Ruth. He had also made several uncharacteristic mistakes at work, which coworkers later attributed to his distracted state of mind. Could he have known Ruth was pregnant with his child? And could Becky have known this shocking secret? The breakthrough came when detectives discovered a series of deleted text messages on Michael's phone, which they were able to recover with the help of digital forensic experts. These messages revealed a heated argument between Michael and Becky on the night of her death. In the texts, Becky confronted Michael about his affair with Ruth, adding the binky emoji, and Michael, in a panic, admitted to the relationship. The argument escalated quickly, and the final message from Michael suggested he was going to, quote, "F you to death." With this new evidence, the police had what they needed to tie Michael directly to the murder. The text provided a clear motive. Michael had killed Becky in a desperate attempt to escape the fallout from his affair and Ruth's pregnancy. On the evening of September 21, 2019, after uncovering the damning text messages and learning about Ruth's pregnancy, police were confident that they had enough evidence to arrest Michael Frederickson. Michael, 35, was a successful financial advisor in San Antonio, known for his calm and collected demeanor. However, beneath the surface, he was a man trapped by his own secrets and sexual desires. His affair with his mother-in-law, Ruth, and the news that she was pregnant with his child had driven him to a breaking point. The detectives decided to approach Michael at his home, a modest house in a quiet San Antonio neighborhood. They arrived just after 8 p.m. when they knew Michael would likely be home. The air was thick with tension as they knocked on the door. When Michael answered, the TV set to how-to videos about child raising. He appeared tired and on edge, a stark contrast to the composed image he usually projected. The lead detective informed Michael that they needed to talk about new developments in the case. Michael hesitated but allowed them inside. The detectives wasted no time confronting him with the evidence: the recovered text messages, Ruth's pregnancy, and the clear motive that had emerged. As they laid out the details, Michael's calm facade began to crumble. At first, he tried to deny everything, claiming that the messages were taken out of context and that he and Becky had simply argued, as many couples do. But when Detective Diaz mentioned Ruth's pregnancy, Michael's expression changed. The color drained from his face, and he became visibly agitated, pacing the room and avoiding my contact. Realizing that the police had him cornered, Michael finally broke down. He confessed to the affair and admitted that on the night of Becky's murder, he had lost control. When Becky confronted him about the affair after Ruth literally waved her positive pregnancy test in her infertile daughter's face, he panicked. In a fit of rage and desperation, he grabbed the rolling pin from the kitchen counter and beat her to death with it. He explained that he believed eliminating Becky would somehow solve his problems, allowing him to start a new life with Ruth and their unborn child. The detectives arrested Michael on the spot, reading him his rights as they placed him in handcuffs. Michael offered no resistance. His head hung low in resignation. As the police led him out of the house, neighbors gathered on their porches, shocked to see the man they knew being taken away for such a brutal crime. The extended Frederickson family, devastated by the news, struggled to comprehend how their once loving husband and son-in-law could commit such a heinous act. For them, the arrest marked the beginning of a long and painful journey toward justice. Michael Frederickson's trial began on December 30, 2019 at the Bexar County Courthouse in San Antonio. The case quickly drew attention from local news outlets like KSA 12 and the San Antonio Express News. Reporters lined up outside the courthouse, eager to cover every detail of the shocking murder case involving a respected financial advisor, his wife, and her mother. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Lisa Perez-Bruto, a sharp, no-nonsense prosecutor known for her methodical approach in the courtroom. Perez-Bruto painted a chilling picture of Michael as a man driven to murder by the pressure of his affair with Ruth Breedlove and her unexpected pregnancy. She argued that Michael, unable to face the consequences of his actions, brutally killed Becky in a desperate attempt to escape his crumbling life. Perez's case was built around the text messages recovered from Michael's phone, Ruth's pregnancy, and Michael's own confession to the police. On the other side, the defense attorney, Mark Caldwell, tried to portray Michael as a man under extreme emotional distress. Caldwell, known for his ability to sway juries with his empathetic approach, argued that Michael never intended to kill Becky. Instead, Caldwell claimed that the crime was a tragic accident, the result of a heated argument that spiraled out of control. He urged the jury to consider Michael's previously clean record and the stress he was under at the time. Throughout the trial, Becky's family sat in the courtroom, their grief palpable. They listened intently as witnesses took the stand, recounting the events leading up to Becky's death. After a week of testimony, the jury deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching a verdict. On January 7, 2020, Michael Frederickson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision that was met with relief from Becky's family, who felt that justice had been served. The verdict brought some closure to Becky's loved ones, but the emotional scars left by the crime would take much longer to heal. The case left the San Antonio community in shock, a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly perfect life can unravel. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of everyone involved in the case changed dramatically. Michael Frederickson began his life sentence at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's William P. Hobby Unit, a stark contrast to the comfortable life he once knew. Behind bars, Michael had plenty of time to reflect on the choices that led him to this point. His reputation in San Antonio was ruined, and he became a symbol of betrayal and deceit. Ruth Breedlove, reeling from the revelations that had come to light during the trial, found herself ostracized by the community. The affair with Michael, once a secret passion, was now public knowledge. Ruth moved out of San Antonio, seeking to start over in the new city where no one knew her story. However, the emotional toll of the trial and the loss of her daughter weighed heavily on her. The pregnancy, once a source of excitement, became a painful reminder of the destruction she had helped cause. Ruth ultimately decided to give the child up for adoption, believing it was the best way to ensure a better future. As the months passed, the story of Becky Frederickson's murder became another tragic chapter in San Antonio's history. But for those who had known her, the loss was a wound that would never fully heal. Charlie Mabry was 42 years old. He lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, with his wife, Lisa Ann. Charlie worked as a bank manager at First Union National Bank. He was known for being very organized and responsible. Charlie grew up in Charlotte, where he attended East Mecklenburg High School. Later, he went to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and got a degree in finance. Charlie was a quiet and thoughtful person. He loved to read books, especially mysteries, and enjoyed watching movies. Some of his favorites were old detective films. He also liked to play chess and often spent his weekends at the local chess club. His friends described him as kind and dependable. He was always there when someone needed help. Charlie was deeply in love with his wife, Lisa Ann. They had been married for 10 years. Lisa Ann was a real estate agent. She was very outgoing and loved to throw big parties. They were childless, but very close to their families. Charlie's younger brother, Jock, was important to him. Jock worked as Charlie's assistant and helped to manage his busy schedule. In the days before his death, Charlie was very stressed. He had found out that Lisa Ann was having sex with several other men. This news broke his heart. He was so upset that he started eating a lot and drinking too much alcohol. He gained a lot of weight and became an alcoholic. His friends noticed that he was not himself anymore. They worried about him, but he didn't talk much about his problems. Charlie had been thinking about divorcing Lisa Ann. He knew it would be difficult, but he didn't see any other way to find peace. Despite everything, he still went to work every day and did his job well. He hoped that things would get better, but he was very sad and felt trapped in his situation. A few days before his death, Charlie spent a lot of time in his home office. He was looking through old photo albums and thinking about happier times. He also watched the news about the upcoming NCAA basketball tournament, which he always enjoyed. His friends and family didn't know how bad things had gotten for him. They were shocked when they heard the news of his death. On the morning of March 15, 2001, it was a cloudy day in Charlotte, North Carolina. At 8:30 a.m., Jock Mabry arrived at his brother Charlie's house. Jock was there to help Charlie with some work, as he often did. As he walked up to the front door, he felt a strange sense of unease. Jock knocked, but there was no answer. He used his key to open the door and called out for Charlie, but the house was silent. Jock walked through the quiet house, heading toward Charlie's home office. When he reached the door, he saw something that made his heart stop. Charlie was slumped over in his chair, a gun in his right hand, and there was a gunshot wound to his head. The sight was shocking and horrifying. Jock's hands trembled as he stood there, trying to process what he was seeing. Immediately, Jock ran to the phone and dialed 911. His voice shook as he told the operator that he had found his brother, and it looked like Charlie had taken his own life. The operator stayed on the line with Jock, trying to keep him calm while they waited for the police to arrive. Jock paced the room, looking around and trying to understand how this had happened. As he waited, Jock noticed something strange. Charlie was left-handed, but the gun was in his right hand. This detail stood out to him, making him question if this was really a suicide. He told the 911 operator about it, and she assured him that the police would investigate everything thoroughly. Within 15 minutes, the police arrived. They quickly secured the area and began their investigation, taking pictures, collecting evidence, and talking to Jock about what he had found. The police arrived at Charlie Mabry's house at 8:50 a.m. on March 15, 2001. The weather was cloudy and chilly, matching the somber mood of the situation. Detective Sarah Marlett and Detective Joe Jack Solaire led the investigation. They were known for their thorough and careful work. When the detectives entered the home office, they saw Charlie's body slumped over in his chair. The scene was disturbing. Charlie had a gunshot wound to his head, and the gun was in his right hand. This immediately caught the detectives' attention because Charlie was left-handed. There was no suicide note, which was also unusual. The detectives began their investigation by carefully examining the office. The room was mostly tidy, with just a few papers scattered on the desk. There were photos of Charlie and his wife, Lisa Ann, on the shelves. The detectives took pictures of everything and collected evidence, including the gun and any fingerprints they could find. Detective Marlett noticed the position of the gun and the angle of the wound. It didn't look right for a suicide. She and Detective Solaire discussed their observations and agreed that they needed to consider other possibilities. They talked to Jock Mabry, who had found his brother's body. Jock was visibly shaken but tried to provide as much information as he could. The detectives asked Jock about Charlie's recent behavior and any problems he might have been facing. Jock mentioned Charlie's struggles with alcohol and his distress over Lisa Ann's infidelity. He also told them about Charlie's plans to divorce Lisa Ann, which might have been a motive for someone to harm him. The detectives then used various tools to investigate the scene further. They used a special powder to find fingerprints and collected samples of anything that might provide clues, like hairs or fibers. They also checked Charlie's phone and computer for any messages or emails that could explain what happened. As they worked, Detective Solaire found a set of bank statements hidden in a drawer. These statements showed large sums of money being transferred to an offshore account in Lisa Ann's name. This discovery was significant and raised more questions about Lisa Ann's involvement. The police also talked to neighbors and friends to see if anyone had noticed anything unusual. Some neighbors mentioned hearing arguments between Charlie and Lisa Ann, which added to the suspicion. By the end of the day, the detectives had gathered a lot of evidence but still had many questions. The crime scene suggested that Charlie's death was not a simple suicide but a potential murder. The unusual details in the hidden bank statements pointed to a deeper, more complex story. The investigation was just beginning, and the detectives knew they had a challenging case ahead of them. Lisa Ann Mabry, 35, was the first suspect the police investigated. She was Charlie's wife and worked as a successful real estate agent in Charlotte, known for her charm and persuasive skills. She often hosted elaborate parties, including her infamous nude masquerade, making her a well-known figure in their community. On the afternoon of March 15, 2001, Detectives Sarah Marlett and Joe Jack Solaire visited Lisa Ann at her office. She greeted them with a calm demeanor, but the detectives could see the worry in her eyes. They began by asking her about the events leading up to Charlie's death. Lisa Ann explained that she and Charlie had been having marital problems. She admitted that they argued frequently and that Charlie was upset about what she said were her innocent and platonic friendships with other men. Lisa Ann's calmness was unsettling to the detectives. She spoke clearly and confidently, but there were inconsistencies in her statements. For example, she claimed to have been at home the previous night, but neighbors reported seeing her car leave late in the evening. The detectives then asked Lisa Ann about the hidden bank statements they found in Charlie's office. These statements showed large sums of money being transferred to an offshore account in her name. Lisa Ann seemed taken aback but quickly recovered, saying the money was for a business investment she hadn't told Charlie about. Despite her explanations, the detectives remained suspicious. They asked Lisa Ann if she knew why Charlie would have the gun in his right hand if he was left-handed. She hesitated and then suggested that he might have been secretly ambidextrous or in a state of distress. Throughout the interrogation, Lisa Ann maintained her composure. However, her calm and collected manner, combined with the hidden bank statements and the inconsistencies in her story, made her a prime suspect. The detectives noted that her possible motive could be the impending divorce, which would leave her without the financial support and lifestyle she was accustomed to. As the interview ended, Lisa Ann asked if she could go home. The detectives allowed her to leave, but made it clear that she was still under investigation. They watched as she walked out of the office, her face betraying a mix of fear and defiance. The detectives knew they needed more evidence to connect Lisa Ann directly to Charlie's death. They planned to look deeper into her financial transactions and personal relationships. Lisa Ann's hidden life and potential motives made her a key figure in unraveling the truth behind Charlie's mysterious death. Jock Mabry, 29, was the next person the police investigated. He was Charlie's younger brother and worked as Charlie's assistant. Jock was known for being loyal, efficient, and discreet. He handled Charlie's busy schedule and knew a lot about his personal life. On March 16, 2001, detectives Sarah Marlett and Joe Jack Soler brought Jock in for questioning. They wanted to understand more about his relationship with Charlie and Lisa Ann. Jock was visibly upset but cooperative. He admitted that he had been very close to Charlie and was deeply affected by his death. The detectives asked Jock about his relationship with Lisa Ann. After a moment of hesitation, Jock confessed that he had been one of Lisa Ann's lovers. He explained that he admired her and got caught up in her charm. However, he insisted that he had no reason to harm his brother. Jock seemed genuinely remorseful and ashamed of his actions. Detective Marlett then asked Jock about the night before Charlie's death. Jock explained that he had been at home and had spoken to Charlie on the phone. Charlie seemed stressed but didn't mention anything about harming himself. Jock's alibi was solid, but the detectives still had doubts because of his close relationship with both Charlie and Lisa Ann. The detectives also questioned Jock about the hidden bank statements found in Charlie's office. Jock seemed surprised and said he had no knowledge of the offshore account. He explained that he managed Charlie's schedule and some finances but wasn't involved in all aspects of Charlie's financial life. Jock's demeanor during the interrogation was a mix of sadness and guilt. He was devastated by his brother's death and upset about his sexual involvement with Lisa Ann. The detectives noted that while Jock had a potential motive due to his affair with Lisa Ann, he also seemed genuinely distraught and cooperative. Despite his cooperation, the detectives couldn't ignore the possibility that Jock might have had a role in Charlie's death. They decided to investigate further, looking into Jock's phone records, emails, and financial transactions to see if there was any connection to the offshore account or other suspicious activities. On March 18, 2001, a few days after Charlie's death, the weather was sunny but cool in Charlotte. Detective Sarah Marlett received a call that new evidence had been found. A junior police cadet was running evidence found at the Mabry house when she noticed something shiny. Upon closer inspection, she saw it was a CD. Detective Marlett and her partner, Detective Joe Jack Soler, quickly examined the CD at the police station. They found several documents and emails on it. The emails were between Lisa Ann and an unknown person discussing plans to transfer large sums of money to an offshore account. There were also detailed plans about a new life in the Philippines. This new evidence was crucial. The detectives immediately linked the CD to the hidden bank statements they had found earlier. They also discovered emails that showed Lisa Ann was planning to leave both Charlie and David Palmer, Charlie's best friend, and one of her other lovers. The documents revealed Lisa Ann's true intentions and painted a clearer picture of her motives. Detectives Marlett and Soler realized that Lisa Ann had been planning her escape for a long time. She had been funneling money into an offshore account, preparing to start a new life far away. The fact that Charlie had discovered this deception might have pushed him to finally decide on a divorce, which in turn could have led Lisa Ann to take drastic measures. With this new evidence, the detectives decided to bring Lisa Ann in for another round of questioning. This time, they confronted her with the emails and plans they have found. Lisa Ann's calm demeanor began to crack. She tried to explain the emails away, saying they were part of a business deal gone wrong with a wealthy Filipino family. However, the detectives were not convinced. The new evidence also showed that David Palmer was more involved than they initially thought. His influence over Lisa Ann and their affair added another layer to the investigation. The detectives knew they had to question David Palmer with a focus on his knowledge of Lisa Ann's plans. As the detectives pieced together the information, it became clear that Charlie's death was not a simple case of suicide. The hidden bank statements, the plans for a new life, and the emails pointed to a well-thought-out scheme. The detectives were determined to uncover the truth and bring justice for Charlie. David Palmer, 50, was the next person the police investigated. David was Charlie's best friend and had a reputation for being charming, ambitious, and somewhat manipulative. He worked as a financial consultant in Charlotte and was well known in social circles. He had been involved in a secret affair with Lisa Ann for several years, which complicated the case further. On March 20, 2001, detectives Sarah Marlett and Joe Jack Soler brought David in for questioning. They wanted to understand his relationship with Charlie and Lisa Ann and to uncover any potential motives he might have had. David appeared confident but slightly nervous as he sat down in the interrogation room. The detectives began by asking David about his friendship with Charlie. David spoke fondly of Charlie, describing him as a loyal and trustworthy friend. He claimed he had no knowledge of Charlie's intention to divorce Lisa Ann and expressed shock over Charlie's death. When asked about his affair with Lisa Ann, David admitted to it, but insisted that it was purely a personal matter and had nothing to do with Charlie's death. The detectives then confronted David with the emails found on the CD. These emails showed detailed discussions between David and Lisa Ann about their plans to transfer money to an offshore account and start a new life together. David's demeanor changed. He became defensive and agitated. He claimed the emails were part of a harmless fantasy and that neither he nor Lisa Ann had any intention of acting on them. David's potential motive was clear to the detectives. With Charlie out of the picture, David and Lisa Ann could have continued their relationship without fear of discovery. Additionally, there were financial benefits to be gained from Charlie's death. The detectives pressed David on these points, but he continued to deny any involvement in Charlie's death. Throughout the interrogation, David's responses fluctuated between calm and agitated. He seemed genuinely upset about Charlie's death, but was also defensive about his relationship with Lisa Ann. The detectives noted that while David had a clear motive, his emotional reactions made it difficult to gauge his true involvement. The detectives decided to dig deeper into David's financial transactions and personal communications to find more concrete evidence. They also planned to re-interview Lisa Ann to see if her story would change now that they had more information. By the end of the interview, David was allowed to leave, but the detectives made it clear that he was still a suspect. The new evidence and David's reactions provided valuable insights, but there were still many unanswered questions. The investigation continued as the detectives worked to piece together the full story behind Charlie's death. On March 25, 2001, the detectives received a breakthrough. The weather was rainy, and Detective Sarah Marlett was going through the evidence one more time when she found a hidden clue in the emails from the CD. One email from Lisa Ann to an unknown recipient detailed a plan to stage Charlie's death to look like a suicide. This was the missing piece they needed. Detective Marlett and Detective Joe Jack Soler quickly reviewed their findings. They now had enough evidence to confront Lisa Ann. The emails, bank transfers, and her calm demeanor during questioning all pointed to her as the mastermind behind Charlie's death. She had planned to leave Charlie and start a new life in the Philippines. But when he discovered her plans and decided to divorce her, she decided to take drastic measures. On March 26, 2001, at 9:00 a.m., the detectives went to Lisa Ann's house. The weather was still gloomy, mirroring the gravity of the situation. Lisa Ann opened the door, surprised to see the detectives. When they told her she was under arrest for the murder of her husband, her face showed a mix of shock and anger. She tried to protest her innocence, but the detectives read her rights and took her into custody. At the police station, Lisa Ann was interrogated again. This time, faced with the overwhelming evidence, she broke down and confessed. She admitted that she had planned to kill Charlie to avoid the shame and financial ruin that would come with the divorce. She revealed that she had convinced him to drink heavily the night before, then shot him with a gun in his right hand to make it look like a suicide. The news of Lisa Ann's arrest shocked the community. Charlie's family, especially Jock, was devastated. Jock had never imagined that his sister-in-law could commit such a terrible act. He felt a mix of anger and betrayal, but also a sense of relief that the truth had finally come out. Lisa Ann's arrest also impacted David Palmer, who was questioned again but found not directly involved in the murder plan. He was, however, implicated in the financial schemes and faced his own legal troubles. As Lisa Ann awaited trial, the community of Charlotte tried to come to terms with the tragic events. Charlie's memory was honored by his friends and family, who found some solace in knowing that his death was not in vain and that justice had been served. The trial of Lisa Ann Mabry began on September 10, 2001, in Charlotte. The courtroom was filled with media and spectators eager to see justice served. The prosecution, led by attorney Mark Vila, a determined and experienced 45-year-old, argued that Lisa Ann had carefully planned and executed her husband's murder. Vila presented evidence of the hidden bank accounts, the staged suicide, and Lisa Ann's motive to avoid financial ruin and public shame. The defense attorney, Sula Tabi, a sharp and passionate 38-year-old, countered by painting Lisa Ann as a desperate woman trapped in an unhappy marriage. He argued that Charlie's alcoholism and erratic behavior drove Lisa Ann to make poor decisions, but insisted she was not guilty of murder. Tavi tried to cast doubt on the evidence, suggesting that someone else could have framed Lisa Ann. Throughout the trial, Charlie's family sat in the courtroom, their faces showing a mix of sorrow and anger. Jock Mabry, especially, found it hard to listen to the details of his brother's death and the betrayal by Lisa Ann. Friends and neighbors attended in support, hoping for a just outcome. The jury deliberated for 2 days before reaching a verdict. On September 22, 2001, they found Lisa Ann Mabry guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was filled with a sense of relief and sadness. Charlie's family felt justice had been served, but the pain of losing him remained. Lisa Ann showed little emotion as the verdict was read. Her once confident demeanor was replaced by a resigned expression. The community of Charlotte reacted to the news with a mix of shock and closure. The trial had revealed the dark secrets behind a seemingly perfect life, and many found it hard to reconcile the charming real estate agent they knew with the convicted murderer. Attorney Mark Vila expressed satisfaction with the verdict, stating that justice had been served for Charlie Mabry. Defense attorney Sula Tabi expressed disappointment but acknowledged the jury's decision. The trial had been intense and emotional, leaving a lasting impact on everyone involved. In the aftermath of the trial, Charlie's family and friends continued to mourn his loss but found some comfort in the verdict. They hoped to rebuild their lives and remember Charlie for the loving husband, brother, and friend he was. The case also left a mark on the community, reminding everyone of the importance of looking beyond appearances and the consequences of deceit and betrayal. After the trial, life slowly began to move forward for everyone involved in the case. The community of Charlotte was still in shock, but they tried to return to their daily routines. Charlie's family struggled to cope with the loss and the betrayal they had faced. Jock Mabry, Charlie's younger brother, was deeply affected by the events. He had to come to terms with his own involvement with Lisa Ann and the impact it had on his brother's life. Jock decided to leave his job as Charlie's assistant and move to a different city to start fresh. He sought therapy to deal with his guilt and grief, determined to rebuild his life. Charlie's parents, who had been heartbroken by the murder, found solace in their remaining family and friends. They set up a scholarship fund in Charlie's name at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where he had studied. This helped them feel like they were honoring his memory in a positive way. Lisa Ann Mabry was sent to the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women. Life in prison was a stark contrast to her previous life of social gatherings and real estate success. She had a lot of time to reflect on her actions and the choices that led her to this point. Despite her efforts to appeal the conviction, her attempts were unsuccessful, and she remained in prison. David Palmer, Charlie's best friend, faced his own consequences. Although he was not charged with murder, his involvement in the financial schemes and the affair with Lisa Ann tarnished his reputation. He lost many clients and friends, and his business suffered. David decided to leave Charlotte and try to rebuild his career elsewhere, away from the shadow of the scandal. Detectives Sarah Marlett and Joe Jack Soler continued their work in the Charlotte Police Department. The case had been one of the most challenging of their careers, but it also brought them closer as partners. They were commended for their thorough investigation and dedication to solving the case. The experience made them more determined to seek justice in their future cases. The community, though scared by the tragedy, slowly began to heal. Neighbors and friends supported Charlie's family and each other, knowing that such a devastating event could happen to anyone. The case of Charlie Mabry remained a reminder of the dangers of deceit and the importance of staying vigilant. As the months passed, life in Charlotte returned to a new normal. The memory of Charlie Mabry lived on through the scholarship fund and the stories shared by those who knew him. His family and friends found ways to honor his legacy and move forward, even as they continued to grieve his loss. This is the story of Sarah Miller, a compassionate nurse, loving wife, and mother whose life was cruelly cut short, a victim of a twisted love triangle. It was a calm, sunny morning in Roseville, California on March 15, 2021. Around 7:30 a.m., David Miller, Sarah's husband, called 911 in a panic. "I found my wife unresponsive," he shouted into the phone. The operator tried to keep him calm as she dispatched emergency services to their home in a quiet suburban neighborhood known for its safety and friendly community. David claimed he had just returned from his regular early morning jog. When David entered the house, everything seemed normal at first. The smell of coffee from the kitchen lingered in the air, and the kids' toys were scattered around, a usual sight in the Miller household. But as David walked upstairs to their bedroom, he knew something was wrong. The door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. When he pushed it open, he found Sarah lying on the floor near their bed, a pair of panties tied around her neck. She wasn't moving. David rushed to her side, trying to wake her up, but she was unresponsive. He quickly checked for a pulse and, finding none, grabbed his phone to call for help. The Roseville Fire Department and police arrived at the scene within minutes. Roseville is known for its prompt emergency response, and this day was no different. Paramedics rushed upstairs, but soon confirmed the worst. Sarah Miller was dead. David was inconsolable, pacing back and forth in the living room, his hands shaking. He kept muttering, "How could this happen?" over and over. Neighbors soon gathered outside the Miller home, drawn by the flashing lights of the emergency vehicles. News spread quickly in the close-knit community, and by mid-morning, local reporters from the Roseville Press-Tribune and even Sacramento's KCRA3 were on the scene, looking for details about what had happened in one of the city's most peaceful neighborhoods. David, now a suspect, was taken to the police station for questioning. His tear-streaked face and trembling hands made it clear he was in shock. But for the police, this was just the beginning of a complex and tragic investigation into the life and death of Sarah Miller. Sarah Miller was 37 years old and worked as a nurse at Sutter Roseville Medical Center. She was known for her compassionate and dedicated nature, always putting her patients first. Sarah lived in a charming two-story house in Roseville with her husband, David, and their two children, Mitt, aged 8, and Catcher, aged 5. Sarah graduated from the University of California, Davis, with a degree in nursing. She was well-liked by her classmates and professors, who admired her dedication and drive. After college, she quickly found a job at Sutter Roseville, where she worked for over a decade. Her colleagues often said she had a special way with patients, always knowing how to comfort and care for them. She was the type of person who would drop everything to help someone in need. In her personal life, Sarah enjoyed simple pleasures. She loved gardening, and her backyard was filled with blooming flowers and plants. She also enjoyed cooking, often trying new recipes from her favorite cooking shows and food blogs. Her kids loved her homemade chocolate chip cookies, a recipe passed down from her grandmother. In the days leading up to her death, Sarah seemed happy and focused on her family and work. She had recently celebrated Mitt's birthday with a small family party. They had cake, played games, and even watched Mitt's favorite movie, The Hangover 2. Sarah had also been working extra shifts at the hospital, helping out during the COVID-19 pandemic. She was always willing to lend a hand, and her dedication did not go unnoticed by her supervisors. Sarah had dreams for the future. She talked about taking a family trip to France once things returned to normal. She also wanted to go back to school to specialize in pediatric nursing, a field she felt passionate about. Her friends and family knew her as a loving mother, a devoted wife, and a true friend. Sarah's tragic death left a huge void in the lives of those who knew and loved her. Her colleagues at the hospital were in shock, and her family was heartbroken. Sarah Miller's life was one of dedication, love, and kindness, and her loss was deeply felt by the Roseville community. The Roseville Police Department responded quickly to the 911 call from David Miller on March 15, 2021. They arrived at the Miller residence within minutes. Leading the investigation was Detective Laura Benedicto, a seasoned investigator known for her meticulous attention to detail. Detective Benedicto, along with her partner, Detective Julian Collins, began examining the scene. The Miller's home, located in a peaceful suburb, was now a crime scene. The bedroom where Sarah Miller was found was in disarray. Clothes were scattered on the floor, and the bed was unmade. A broken picture frame lay near Sarah's body, adding to the chaotic scene. Sarah had been strangled with her own panties, a detail that suggested a crime of passion. Detectives Benedicto and Collins began their investigation by collecting evidence. They dusted for fingerprints, collected DNA samples, and took numerous photographs of the scene. They also interviewed David Miller, who was visibly shaken and distraught. David claimed he had been out jogging and found Sarah when he returned. Despite his grief, detectives noted some inconsistencies in his account. The police brought in forensic experts to assist with the investigation. They used advanced tools and techniques to gather as much information as possible. Forensic scientists examined the broken picture frame and other items in the room for fingerprints and DNA. They also analyzed the Julians on Sarah's neck to determine the force and angle of the strangulation. Every detail was crucial in piecing together what had happened. Detective Benedicto spoke to the neighbors, who were shocked by the news. Roseville was known for its low crime rate, and something like this was almost unheard of. Neighbors reported seeing David go for his morning jog, as he usually did, but no one had seen anything suspicious. One neighbor mentioned hearing raised voices coming from the Miller house the night before, which added a new layer to the investigation. As the day went on, the police continued their work, carefully preserving the crime scene and gathering as much evidence as they could. Detective Benedicto and her team were determined to find out who was responsible for Sarah's death. They worked late into the night, reviewing the evidence and interviewing everyone who might have information. The crime scene was eventually cleared, but the investigation was far from over. Detective Benedicto knew that the key to solving the case lay in the details. Every piece of evidence, no matter how small, could be the clue that cracked the case. The Roseville Police Department was committed to finding justice for Sarah Miller and bringing her killer to account. The first suspect in the investigation was David Miller, Sarah's husband. David was 40 years old and worked as a sales executive for a tech company in Sacramento. He was known for his charming and outgoing personality, making him successful in his career. However, behind closed doors, David had been unfaithful of engaging in multiple extramarital affairs. This detail quickly made him a person of interest in the case. David was brought to the police station for questioning. Detective Laura Benedicto and Detective Julian Collins led the interrogation. David appeared distraught and exhausted. He revealed that instead of jogging in Mayhew Park at the time of Sarah's murder, which is what he told the 911 operator and police initially, he was actually having sex with his lover, Emile Rochefort, that morning. David explained that he often went to Emile for sex to clear his mind and deal with stress. Despite his apparent grief, detectives noticed inconsistencies in David's story. When asked about his relationship with Sarah, David described it as strained but loving. He admitted to his affairs, explaining that they were a way to cope with the pressures of work and family life. He seemed sincere, but the detectives were not convinced. During the interrogation, David was asked about his sexual relationship with Emile Rochefort, a 25-year-old personal trainer. David admitted to the affair, but insisted that Emile had nothing to do with Sarah's death. He claimed that Emile was his alibi, as they had been having sex on the morning of the murder. David's calm demeanor and detailed answers raised suspicions among the investigators. They found it odd that he could be so composed given the circumstances. To verify David's alibi, the police contacted Emile Rochefort. Emile confirmed that he and David had been together that morning, but his story also had some inconsistencies. This further complicated the investigation. Detectives Benedicto and Collins decided to dig deeper into David's personal life. They discovered text messages and emails that revealed the extent of his infidelity and his turbulent relationship with Sarah. Neighbors and friends were interviewed, and many described David as charming but sometimes aloof. Some neighbors recalled hearing arguments from the Miller household, especially in recent weeks. This information painted a picture of a marriage under strain, adding to the suspicion surrounding David. Despite his outward calm, David's manipulative and deceitful nature began to emerge. Detectives were now more determined than ever to find out if David's facade of innocence was hiding a darker truth. The investigation into Sarah's death was just beginning, and David Miller remained a key suspect. The second suspect in the investigation was Emile Rochefort, a 25-year-old personal trainer and David Miller's lover. Emile was a French national known for his attractive looks, fit physique, and confident demeanor. He worked at a high-end gym in Sacramento, popular among the city's elite. Emile was ambitious and driven, often pursuing what he wanted without much regard for others. Detectives Laura Benedicto and Julian Collins brought Emile in for questioning. Emile appeared calm and collected, but his bold personality was evident. He did not shy away from admitting his relationship with David. In fact, he seemed almost proud of it. Emile described how he met David at the gym and how their relationship quickly developed after David made a sexual advance at him in the gym's bathroom. Emile's motive for potentially harming Sarah became a point of interest. Detectives discovered text messages between Emile and David where Emile referred to Sarah in vicious and derogatory terms, calling her an old cow whose milk is already spoiled. This suggested a deep resentment towards Sarah. When asked about these messages, Emile dismissed them as harmless jokes. During the interrogation, Emile claimed that he and David had broken up after he found sexually explicit text between David and another man named George. Emile explained that he felt betrayed and hurt by David's infidelity. Despite this, he maintained that he had no reason to harm Sarah. He said he was at his apartment alone on the night of the murder. The detectives noted Emile's defensiveness and his quickness to deflect blame onto others. Emile insisted that David was the one with more to lose if Sarah found out about the affairs. He painted a picture of David as a desperate man willing to go to great lengths to protect his secrets. Emile's alibi was weak, and his aggressive attitude during questioning did little to help his case. Detectives continued to press him, but Emile stuck to his story. He repeatedly denied any involvement in Sarah's death, suggesting that the real culprit was David or his mysterious lover George. Despite his confident exterior, Emile's texts and demeanor raised many red flags for the investigators. His willingness to speak negatively about Sarah and his rocky relationship with David added complexity to the case. Detectives Benedicto and Collins knew they needed to gather more evidence before drawing any conclusions. As the investigation progressed, Emile remained a suspect. His bold personality and lack of a solid alibi made him a person of interest. The detectives were determined to uncover the truth and find out who was responsible for Sarah Miller's tragic death. The third suspect in the investigation was George F. Kessler, a close friend of the Miller family. George was 65 years old and a former Olympic skier. He had a quiet demeanor and was known for being friendly and helpful. George often spent time with the Millers and was considered a reliable family friend. Detectives Laura Benedicto and Julian Collins brought George in for questioning. He appeared calm but surprised by the call. George explained that he had known David and Sarah for many years. He described his relationship with them as close and supportive, especially after David confided in him about his marital issues. George's potential motive became clearer during the interrogation. Investigations revealed that George was not just a friend, but also David's current lover and sexual partner. This relationship had been kept secret, adding another layer to the complex web of deceit. George admitted that he and David had recently become romantically involved, which created tension with Sarah. Detectives asked George about his whereabouts on the morning of March 15, 2021. George claimed he was at home, recovering from a recent knee surgery. He provided medical records to support his statement, but the detectives were not fully convinced. They pressed him about his knowledge of David's affairs and Sarah's discovery of them. George's answers were calm and measured, but detectives noticed signs of stress. He admitted that Sarah had confided in him about David's affair with Emile Rochefort. Sarah had discovered the affair just weeks before her death and was gathering evidence to confront David. George knew about Sarah's plans but claimed he had no involvement in her death. Text messages between George and David revealed a complicated relationship. One message from George read, "I can't keep loving you. This has to stop." This indicated that George was deeply involved in the situation and might have felt pressured by David's actions. When confronted with these messages, George became more defensive, insisting that he only wanted to help David and had no motive to harm Sarah. Detectives Benedicto and Collins noted George's jealousy and his complex relationship with the Millers. As a childless bachelor, George might have been envious of the family life David had with Sarah. This envy, coupled with the stress of maintaining this secret relationship with David, raised more questions about his potential involvement. Despite his calm exterior, George's connection to David and his knowledge of Sarah's plans made him a key suspect. The detectives continued to investigate, knowing that every detail could bring them closer to solving the case and uncovering the truth behind Sarah Miller's tragic death. On March 18, 2021, just 3 days after Sarah Miller's tragic death, the weather in Roseville was cloudy with a slight chill in the air. Detective Laura Benedicto received a call from a neighbor who had found something suspicious in a nearby park. The neighbor, an early riser, was walking his dog in Maydew Park when he stumbled upon a small black duffel bag partially hidden under a bush. Detective Benedicto and her team quickly arrived at the scene. The park, usually bustling with joggers and families, was eerily quiet that morning. The duffel bag was carefully examined and opened. Inside, the police found a pair of gloves, a rope, and a smartphone. These items were immediately collected as evidence and sent to the forensic lab for analysis. The police's response to this new evidence was swift and thorough. Forensic experts worked quickly to analyze the contents of the bag. The gloves and rope were tested for fingerprints and DNA, while the smartphone was examined for any data that might provide clues. The phone was a newer model, and after some technical work, the team managed to unlock it. What they found on the smartphone was shocking. Text messages and emails between David Miller and Emile Rochefort were uncovered. The messages included heated exchanges about their relationship and discussions about Sarah. One message from David to Emile read, "We need to figure this out before that bleeping cow finds out everything." This raised new questions about the involvement of both men in Sarah's death. Detective Benedicto was particularly interested in the GPS data from the phone. The record showed that the phone had been in the vicinity of the Miller residence on the morning of the murder, contradicting Emile's claim that he was at his apartment. This evidence was crucial, as it placed Emile closer to the crime scene than he had admitted. The discovery of the duffel bag and its contents provided the detectives with significant new leads. They re-interviewed both David and Emile, confronting them with the new evidence. David continued to deny any involvement, while Emile's confident demeanor began to crack. He became defensive and struggled to explain the incriminating messages and GPS data. Detective Benedicto and her team realized they were getting closer to the truth. The new evidence not only strengthened their suspicions, but also provided a clearer picture of the events leading up to Sarah's death. The investigation intensified as they worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle and bring justice to Sarah Miller. On March 20, 2021, the Roseville Police Department made a breakthrough in the investigation. Detective Laura Benedicto had been reviewing all the evidence collected, including the text messages, DNA results, and alibis. A key piece of evidence was a strand of hair found on the rope used to strangle Sarah. The DNA analysis matched David Miller's profile. Detectives Benedicto and Julian Collins pieced together the timeline of events. They discovered that David had learned about Sarah's intention to file for divorce after finding out about his affair with Emile Rochefort. David feared losing his family and reputation, which drove him to a desperate act. The detectives also revisited the GPS data from the smartphone found in the duffel bag. It showed that David had been near the Miller residence during the time he claimed to be jogging. This contradicted his alibi and placed him at the scene of the crime. With the mounting evidence, the detectives were confident they had their murderer. On the morning of March 21, 2021, the police arrived at the Miller residence. David was in the kitchen, making breakfast for his children. He was calm, but the detectives noticed a slight tremor in his hands. When Detective Benedicto informed David that he was under arrest for the murder of his wife, his face turned pale. He tried to protest, but the evidence was overwhelming. David was handcuffed and taken into custody. As he was led away, neighbors watched in shock. David's reaction was a mix of disbelief and resignation. He did not struggle, knowing that his attempts to cover up his crime had failed. The arrest was a turning point in the case, bringing some relief to the community. Sarah's family was informed about the arrest. They were heartbroken, but also relieved that the person responsible for her death was finally caught. Sarah's parents expressed their gratitude to the police for their diligent work. Mitt and Catcher, Sarah's children, were too young to fully understand what was happening, but they were surrounded by family and friends who offered support. David's arrest was covered extensively in the local news. The Roseville community, known for its safety, was shaken by the tragic event. The case highlighted the dark side of seemingly perfect lives and the length some people would go to protect their secrets. As David sat in his cell, awaiting trial, the detectives continued to gather evidence to ensure a strong case against him. The arrest was just the beginning of the journey toward justice for Sarah Miller. The police were determined to see the case through to its conclusion, providing closure for Sarah's family and the community. David Miller's trial began on March 25, 2021, in the Placer County Courthouse. The courtroom was filled with reporters and community members eager to hear the details of the case. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Sarah Quinns-Bronsel, known for her strong, no-nonsense approach. Quinns-Bronsel presented the case with a clear and compelling argument, outlining how David had killed his wife, Sarah Miller. Quinns-Bronsel emphasized the evidence against David, including the DNA found on the rope, the inconsistent alibis, and the text messages revealing David's affair and his desperation to keep his secrets hidden. She described Sarah as a loving mother and devoted nurse, whose life was tragically cut short by someone she trusted. Quinns-Bronsel argued that David's fear of losing his family and reputation drove him to commit murder. David's defense attorney, Michael Brooks, was a seasoned lawyer known for his persuasive skills. Brooks argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that there was no direct proof linking David to the crime scene. He suggested that the real culprit could be Emile Rochefort or George S. Kessler, trying to shift the blame away from David. Brooks painted David as a grieving husband caught in a complex situation, insisting that the emotional turmoil might have influenced his actions, but did not prove his guilt. Throughout the trial, Sarah's family, including her parents Mike and Linda Thompson, sat in the courtroom, their faces a mix of sadness and hope. They watched closely as the case unfolded, hoping for justice for their daughter. The emotional weight of the trial was evident, with Sarah's parents often seen wiping away tears as the evidence was presented. On March 30, 2021, after several days of testimony and closing arguments, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict. David Miller was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with mixed reactions. While there was relief that justice was served, the trial had taken an emotional toll on everyone involved. The sentencing took place on April 2, 2021. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, in a stern but compassionate tone, expressed sorrow for the loss of Sarah and the impact on her family. David's reaction was subdued. He showed little emotion as the sentence was pronounced, reflecting a sense of resignation rather than surprise. Sarah's family felt a sense of closure, though the pain of losing her remained. The trial had been a difficult journey, but the verdict provided some measure of justice. The trial's outcome underscored the community's commitment to ensuring that such tragedies were met with accountability, while also emphasizing the need for continued support and healing for those affected. After David Miller's conviction, life slowly began to return to normal for everyone involved. Sarah Miller's family faced a long road to healing. Her parents dedicated their time to taking care of Mitt and Catcher. They sought counseling to help deal with their grief and support the children through the loss of their mother and the incarceration of their father. Detective Laura Benedicto continued her work with the Roseville Police Department. The Sarah Miller case had been one of the most challenging of her career, but it also reinforced her commitment to seeking justice. Her partner, Detective Julian Collins, was promoted to sergeant, recognizing his contributions to solving the case. Both detectives received commendations for their work. Emile Rochefort, David's former lover, moved back to France. The publicity and stress of the trial had taken a toll on him. He decided to start fresh, leaving behind the painful memories of his relationship with David. Emile continued his career as a personal trainer, finding success in a new city. George S. Kessler, who had been a close friend to the Miller family and another of David's lovers, distanced himself from the scandal. He retired from public life, focusing on personal reflection and maintaining a low profile. The trial had brought unwanted attention to his past, and he preferred to live quietly. David Miller, now serving a life sentence without parole, faced the reality of his actions. In prison, he attended counseling sessions and participated in rehabilitation programs. However, the betrayal of his family and friends left a permanent Julian on him. He expressed remorse in letters to Sarah's family, but the damage was irreparable. Sarah's legacy lived on through the lives she touched. The memorial fund in her name helped many nursing students achieve their dreams, embodying her spirit of compassion and dedication. The case was a stark reminder of the hidden turmoil that can exist behind closed doors and the importance of seeking justice and truth. Sarah Miller's life was cut short by the very person she trusted the most. As we remember her, let us also remember the importance of honesty and the unbreakable bonds of family and friendship. Lena Klunding was a 36-year-old kindergarten teacher living in Tucson, Arizona. She worked at Sunshine Elementary School, where she was loved by her students and colleagues. Known for her patience and kindness, Lena was the type of teacher who made learning fun and exciting. She often used colorful posters in her classroom, making sure every child felt special and included. Lena lived in a cozy house on a quiet street with her husband Richard and 11-month-old son Dolphin. Her friends often said that Lena's home was filled with laughter and warmth. She had a knack for decorating and often shopped to find the perfect items to make her house a home. Lena's family was very important to her. She was close to her parents, who lived nearby and often helped with Dolphin. Lena dreamed of opening her own daycare center someday, where she could help even more children grow and learn. Lena's friends described her as caring and always willing to lend a hand. She was the type of person who would drop everything to help a friend in need. She volunteered at her local church and was involved in community events. Her warm personality and dedication to her work made her a cherished member of the community. In September 2010, Lena was busy preparing for the new school year. She spent her days setting up her classroom, planning lessons, and making sure everything was perfect for her students. She also spent a lot of time with Dolphin, planning a big celebration for his first birthday. She wanted it to be a special day, full of balloons, cake, and love. She had even ordered a custom cake from a local bakery and invited all her family and friends. In the days leading up to her death, Lena was looking forward to the future. She was excited about the new school year and celebrating Dolphin's first birthday. Her dreams of opening a daycare center and her plans for her son's future were a testament to her loving and nurturing spirit. On the morning of September 12, 2010, the sun was shining brightly in Tucson, Arizona. It was a warm, pleasant day, typical for that time of year. At around 8:00 a.m., Patty Martins, Lena Kleindine's close friend and neighbor, decided to check on Lena. They had planned to go for a morning walk, something they often did together to stay fit and catch up on each other's lives. When Lena didn't show up at the usual time, Patty became worried. Patty walked over to Lena's house, which was just a few doors down from her own. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer. She called Lena's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Feeling uneasy, Patty tried the door and found it unlocked. She slowly stepped inside, calling out Lena's name, but the house was eerily quiet. As Patty made her way through the house, she noticed that everything seemed normal at first. Dolphin's toys were scattered in the living room, and the kitchen had breakfast dishes on the table. But when she reached the bedroom, she was met with a horrifying scene. Lena's lifeless body was lying on the floor, and the room was in disarray. The TV was smashed, and a mirror was shattered, indicating a struggle had taken place. Patty was in shock and felt a wave of fear and sadness wash over her. She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her hands trembling as she tried to explain what she had found. Her voice was shaky, and she had to repeat herself several times before the operator understood the gravity of the situation. Patty stayed outside, pacing back and forth, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't believe what had happened to her friend. Neighbors began to gather, whispering among themselves and speculating about what could have led to such a tragic event. The news quickly spread, and soon local media outlets like the Tucson Sentinel were reporting on the shocking discovery. Lena's death sent shockwaves through the community. People who knew her were heartbroken and in disbelief. How could something so terrible happen to someone so kind and loving? As the police began their investigation, everyone hoped for answers and justice for Lena. When the police arrived at Lena Kleindine's house on September 12, 2010, it was a warm, sunny morning in Tucson, Arizona. Detectives J. Ramirez and Maria Torres, known for their fast response and careful attention to detail at the investigation. The patrol car's flashing lights quickly drew the attention of neighbors, who watched anxiously from their yards and windows. Detectives Ramirez and Torres were both experienced investigators. Ramirez, a tall man in his early 40s, was known for his methodical approach and calm demeanor. Torres, in her late 30s, was sharp-eyed and known for her ability to notice even the smallest details at a crime scene. Together, they made a formidable team. As they entered the house, they were met with a grim scene. The living room showed no signs of a struggle, but the bedroom told a different story. Lena's body lay on the floor, with clear marks of strangulation on her neck. The room was in chaos.
A TV lay shattered on the floor, and a large mirror was broken, its shards scattered everywhere. It was clear that a violent confrontation had taken place. The detectives began their investigation immediately. They called in a team of forensic experts who meticulously collected evidence from the scene. They took fingerprints from the broken TV and mirror and gathered samples of hair and fibers that might have been left by the attacker. They also photographed the entire room, documenting the disarray and any potential clues. Outside, neighbors gathered, whispering and speculating about what had happened. Reporters from local news stations like KVOA and the Tucson Sentinel arrived, setting up cameras and interviewing anyone willing to talk. The community was in shock, struggling to comprehend the tragedy that had struck their quiet neighborhood. Detective Ramirez spoke briefly with the media, asking for anyone with information to come forward. He emphasized the importance of community cooperation in solving the case. Meanwhile, Detective Torres interviewed Patty Martins, who had discovered Lena's body. Sarah, still in shock, described finding the door unlocked and a horrifying scene in the bedroom. Back inside, the forensic team found traces of DNA on Lena's body and under her fingernails, likely from trying to fight off her attacker. They bagged these samples carefully, knowing they could be crucial in identifying the killer. They also discovered a set of muddy footprints near the back door, suggesting the attacker had entered or exited through there. The initial investigation painted a picture of a violent struggle, but many questions remained. Who could have committed such a brutal act? And why would anyone want to harm Lena, a beloved teacher and mother? Detectives Ramirez and Torres were determined to find answers and bring justice to Lena and her family. The first person the police investigated was Richard Klondine, Lena's husband. Richard was 38 years old and owned a local hardware store called Klondine's Hardware. He was well-liked in the community for his charming personality and his knack for helping customers find exactly what they needed. However, those who knew him well knew he could also be secretive and controlling behind closed doors. When detectives J. Ramirez and Maria Torres arrived at Richard's store on September 13, 2010, he seemed calm but surprised to see them. They informed him about Lena's death and asked him to come to the station for questioning. Richard agreed, though he appeared anxious as he closed up his shop, a popular spot among locals for home improvement supplies like tools and paint from well-known brands like DeWalt and Sherwin-Williams. At the station, the detectives started with basic questions. Where was he on the night of the murder? Richard claimed he had been out of town on business, meeting with suppliers in Phoenix, 100 miles away. He provided the name of the hotel where he stayed and said he had receipts to prove it. He seemed confident, but the detectives knew they needed to verify his alibi. As the questioning continued, Richard's demeanor shifted. He became more defensive and agitated, particularly when asked about his relationship with Lena. He admitted they had been having marital problems, but insisted he loved her and would never harm her. The detectives noted his change in behavior, but needed more concrete evidence to link him to the crime. While Richard was being questioned, other officers checked his alibi. They contacted the hotel in Phoenix and reviewed security footage. Richard's name was indeed on the guest list, but the detectives found something odd. The footage showed Richard leaving the hotel late at night and not returning until the early hours of the morning. This raised suspicions, as it meant he could have traveled back to Tucson during that time. Detectives Ramirez and Torres pressed Richard further, asking about his whereabouts during those hours. Richard grew more agitated and struggled to provide a clear answer. He claimed he had gone for a drive because he couldn't sleep, but his story lacked details and consistency. As they left the station, Detective Ramirez told Torres they needed to follow every lead. They were determined to uncover the truth about Richard and his potential involvement in Lena's tragic death. The second person the police investigated was Laura Luzarda Klondine, Richard's secret second wife. Laura was 44 years old and worked as a hospice nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Tucson. She was dedicated to her job and known for her kind and caring nature. In her spare time, Laura was an activist, campaigning for public schools to teach students about extraterrestrial civilizations, such as the Vulcans and the Klingons. Detectives J. Ramirez and Maria Torres visited Laura at her home on September 14, 2010.
Laura was visibly shocked and distressed when they told her about Lena's death. She invited them inside and tried to stay calm as they began their questioning. Her son, 16-year-old Mark Lizarda, was also home but stayed in his room, listening anxiously. The detectives asked Laura about her relationship with Richard. She revealed that she had been married to Richard for 2 years, but only recently discovered his marriage to Lena. Laura said she felt betrayed and heartbroken by Richard's deceit. She insisted she had no idea about his double life until a few days ago when she found suspicious documents in his belongings. Laura provided an alibi for the night of Lena's murder. She said she had been working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital. She gave the detectives the names of her coworkers who could confirm her presence. Detective Torres took detailed notes and assured Laura they would verify her alibi. Despite her distress, Laura cooperated fully with the investigation. She handed over Richard's documents, which she had kept hidden after discovering them. These included financial records, phone bills, and a mysterious report about Richard's activities. The detectives thanked Laura for her help and left to follow up on her information. At St. Mary's Hospital, the detectives spoke with Laura's coworkers, who confirmed she had been at work the entire night. Security footage from the hospital also showed Laura working her shift, which seemed to clear her of any involvement in the murder. However, the detectives knew they couldn't rule out the possibility that she might have known something more about Richard's activities. Laura's cooperation and solid alibi made it difficult for the detectives to consider her a primary suspect, but they were still cautious. They decided to look deeper into Richard's life and any connections he might have had that could shed light on the case. The mysterious report Laura provided hinted at more secrets, possibly related to Richard's business dealings. As they continued their investigation, Detectives Ramirez and Torres remained determined to uncover the truth. Laura's revelations added new layers to the case, making it clear that Richard's double life had far-reaching consequences. On September 18, 2010, a week after Lena Klondine's murder, the weather in Tucson, Arizona, was unusually cool and cloudy. Detective Maria Torres was at the police station, reviewing the case files, when she received an urgent call from a local garbage collection worker who had found something suspicious while collecting trash in a neighborhood not far from Lena's home. Detective Torres and her partner, Detective J. Ramirez, quickly headed to the location, a shopping plaza that housed popular stores like Safeway and Walgreens. The bag looked out of place, and the garbage worker, knowing about the recent high-profile murder, thought it might be important. The detectives carefully opened the bag and found several pairs of men's underwear, a dead end. Meanwhile, the mysterious report Laura Lizarda Klondine had given them earlier became even more relevant. It detailed Richard's involvement in money laundering for Mexican cartels, which explained why he was so secretive. The detectives realized that Richard's illegal activities provided a strong motive for him to silence Lena, who might have discovered his crimes. With the new evidence and a clearer picture of Richard's motives, Detectives Ramirez and Torres felt they were closing in on the truth. They knew they needed to interrogate Richard again, this time confronting him with the damning evidence they had uncovered. As they prepared for this critical step, they hoped to finally bring justice for Lena Klondine and her grieving family. As the investigation continued, Detectives J. Ramirez and Maria Torres turned their attention to Marky Mark Lizarda, Laura's 16-year-old son. Marky Mark was a high school student known for his intelligence and strong bond with his mother. His relationship with Richard, his stepfather, had raised some eyebrows in the community due to their unusually close bond. On September 20, 2010, Detectives Ramirez and Torres visited Marky Mark at his school, where they met with him in a private room. Marky Mark was visibly nervous but agreed to talk. The detectives started with general questions about his relationship with his mother and Richard. He spoke fondly of both but admitted that things had been tense since the discovery of Richard's double life. When asked about the night of Lena's murder, Marky Mark claimed he was home playing video games and chatting with friends online. He provided the detectives with the names of his friends, who later confirmed his story. However, there was something about Marky Mark's demeanor that made the detectives suspicious. He seemed too eager to prove his innocence and stumbled over his words when discussing his whereabouts. Despite his alibi, the detectives felt that Marky Mark might know more than he was letting on. They decided to dig deeper into his online activities. They obtained a warrant to search his computer and found that on the night of the murder, Marky Mark had searched for information on how to cover up a crime and how to dispose of evidence. This discovery was alarming and made him a key suspect. The detectives brought Marky Mark back in for further questioning. This time he was more agitated and defensive. He claimed the searches were for a school project, but the detectives didn't believe him. They pressed him harder, and under the pressure, Marky Mark finally broke down and confessed. He admitted he had found out about Richard's bigamy before his mother and feared losing him as a father figure. Marky Mark's confession shocked the detectives.
The investigation had revealed the dark side of a seemingly normal family, uncovering secrets that would forever change their lives. On September 22, 2010, Tucson, Arizona police were ready to make an arrest. The sky was clear, and the temperature was climbing towards the typical desert heat. Detectives John Ramirez and Maria Torres had gathered enough evidence to confront Mark Lizarda, the 16-year-old who had confessed to killing Lena Klondine in a fit of rage and desperation. Mark's motive was to maintain Richard Klondine as a father figure in his life. He feared losing Richard after discovering his bigamy and was jealous of the role his first family played in his life. In a moment of panic, he broke into Lena's house on the night of September 11, 2010. Inside, a violent confrontation ensued. Lena fought back, but Mark overpowered her, strangling her with a rope he had brought. The struggle left the bedroom in disarray with a smashed TV and a shattered mirror. The detectives pieced together the timeline using surveillance footage, the gas station receipt, and Mark's own internet searches. They knew they had their murderer. On the morning of September 22, they drove to Mark's home to make the arrest. The neighborhood was just starting to wake up, with children waiting for the school bus and people heading to work. Mark was in the living room when the detectives arrived. His mother, Laura, opened the door, her face pale and strained. The detectives explained that they were there to arrest her son. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded, allowing them inside. Mark didn't resist as the detectives handcuffed him and read in his rights. He looked more resigned than surprised. As the police led Mark to the car, Laura broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Neighbors watched in stunned silence, unable to process the scene unfolding before them. The arrest of a teenager for such a brutal crime was unimaginable. In the days that followed, the police continued to uncover more about Richard's illegal activities. The report Laura had given them detailed his involvement in money laundering for Mexican cartels. This led to Richard's own arrest and conviction, adding another layer of betrayal and deceit to an already tragic story. Mark's arrest and the subsequent revelations about Richard brought a dramatic end to the investigation. The community was left to heal from the wounds inflicted by the crime, knowing that justice had been served, but at a tremendous cost. The trial of Mark Lizarda began on December 1, 2010, in Tucson, Arizona. The courtroom was packed with media, community members, and the grieving family of Lena Klondine. The prosecution was led by District Attorney Michael Jackson, a seasoned lawyer known for his no-nonsense approach and dedication to seeking justice. Jackson, 45, had a reputation for being tough but fair, and he was determined to secure a conviction for Lena's brutal murder. On the other side was the defense attorney, Sarah Jean Miller. At 38, Miller was a rising star in the legal world, known for her sharp mind and ability to connect with juries. She argued that Mark, being only 16, should be tried as a juvenile and highlighted his troubled upbringing and the influence of Richard Klondine as mitigating factors. The prosecution presented a strong case, focusing on the overwhelming evidence against Mark. They detailed his confession, the forensic evidence linking him to the crime scene, and his internet searches on how to commit murder. Jackson argued that Mark's actions were premeditated and that he should be held fully accountable for his heinous crime. The defense, however, painted a picture of a vulnerable teenager manipulated by his stepfather, Richard. They argued that Mark's actions were those of a desperate young man who feared losing the only father figure he had ever known. Miller called several character witnesses, including teachers and friends, who spoke about Mark's generally good behavior and his struggles with his home life. She urged the jury to consider his age and psychological state. After several days of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict on December 15, 2010. Mark was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge, taking into account his age and the circumstances, sentenced him to 25 years in prison. This sentence was seen as a balance between punishment and the possibility of rehabilitation. For Mark, the sentence marked the beginning of a long road ahead. He would serve his time in a juvenile facility until he turned 18, after which he would be transferred to an adult prison. The trial's outcome left a lasting impact on all involved, a sobering reminder of the far-reaching consequences of one tragic night. After the trial, life slowly began to return to some semblance of normalcy for those affected by Lena Klondine's tragic murder. For Lena's family, the pain of her loss remained, but they found solace in each other and in the memories they shared. Dolphin,
Lena's 8-month-old son, was the light that kept them going, a constant reminder of her love and legacy. For Richard Klondine, the trial marked the end of his deceitful life. With his arrest and conviction for money laundering, his empire of lies crumbled, leaving behind a trail of destruction. The revelation of his crimes shocked the community and tarnished the reputation of his hardware store, once a staple in the neighborhood. Laura Lizarda Klondine faced the difficult task of rebuilding her life after the betrayal of her husband and the loss of Lena. She threw herself into her work as a nurse, finding solace in helping others. Her activism took on new meaning as she advocated for victims of domestic abuse and campaigned for stronger laws to protect families from similar tragedies. As for Mark Lizarda, his life took a drastically different turn after the trial. Incarcerated in a juvenile facility, he had plenty of time to reflect on his actions and the consequences of his choices. With therapy and counseling, he began to confront his past and work towards rehabilitation. Despite the severity of his crime, there were those who believed in his potential for redemption and hoped that he would one day find a path towards healing and forgiveness. As life moved forward, the memory of Lena Klondine remained a beacon of love and hope in the hearts of those who knew her. Her legacy lived on in the lives she touched and the lessons learned from her tragic death. The murder of Lena Klondine is a tragic reminder of the hidden secrets and dangerous lies that can lurk behind closed doors. In the face of unimaginable loss, her family and friends continue to honor her memory, cherishing the warmth and kindness she brought into their lives. Our victim, Vicki Davis Goderby, was a 28-year-old marketing executive. She possessed a quick wit and a magnetic personality, which drew people to her effortlessly. Vicki's ambition was evident in her dedication to her career, often working late hours to climb the corporate ladder. Despite her professional success, her personal life remained shrouded in secrecy. The classic Southern rumor mill of Charleston, South Carolina swirled about Vicki's alleged sexual involvement with multiple men, including a married man and even a high school student. These rumors, fueled by local chatter at church and iced tea socials, painted a complex picture of a woman entangled in a web of sex and illicit affairs. The gossipy frenzy surrounding her personal life only intensified the intrigue surrounding Vicki. September of 1998 was a tumultuous time in Charleston. The city was still reeling from the aftermath of Hurricane Bonnie, which had struck the region just weeks prior. The hurricane had caused widespread damage, leaving many residents displaced and struggling to rebuild their lives. Against this backdrop of recovery and resilience, the shocking murder of Vicki Davis Goderby unfolded. As we delve deeper into this case, we will explore the lives of those connected to Vicki, including her husband and mother-in-law, both of who would play a central role in the chilling plot that unfolded. We will examine the evidence, witnesses, and motives behind this heinous crime. Join us as we navigate the twists and turns of this true crime tale that gripped the community of Charleston, South Carolina. On a fateful day in September 1998, a peaceful and affluent neighborhood of Charleston, South Carolina was shattered by a heinous crime that would forever haunt its residents. The victim, Vicki Davis Goderby, a 28-year-old marketing executive, met a tragic end in her own bedroom, the scene of a brutal act of violence that sent shockwaves through the community. Vicki was a woman of ambition, known for her quick wit and magnetic personality. Her dedication to her career was unwavering, often working late hours to climb the corporate ladder. However, behind her professional success, there were whispers of a controversial sex life that added a layer of intrigue to the case. Rumors circulated about Vicki's alleged involvement with multiple men, including a married individual and even a high school student. These whispers fueled speculation and cast a shadow over her reputation. The discovery of Vicki's lifeless body sent shockwaves through the affluent neighborhood. The crime scene was a chilling sight, with bloodstains and signs of a violent struggle. The murder weapon, a baseball bat, added a horrifying twist to the already perplexing case. The residents, accustomed to a life of comfort and security, were left in a state of disbelief. News of the murder spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of the local media. The community, once shielded by its genteel, classically Southern affluence, found itself thrust into the spotlight as the investigation unfolded. September 1998 became a month etched in the memories of Charleston's residents. The murder of Vicki Davis Goderby had shattered their sense of security, forcing them to confront the darkness that lurked beneath the surface. It was a crime that demanded answers, and the community rallied together, determined to find justice for Vicky. A quiet neighborhood of Charleston, South Carolina was shattered by the gruesome murder of 28-year-old marketing executive Vicky Davis Goderby in September of 1998. The police, led by the tenacious detective Sean "Trash Talk" Reilly, wasted no time in their pursuit of justice. Upon arriving at the crime scene, the investigators were met with a chilling sight. Vicky's bedroom, once a place of comfort and solace, had been transformed into a scene of unspeakable violence. Blood splatters adorned the walls, starkly contrasting with the elegant decor that surrounded them. The air was heavy with a sense of dread as the investigators began their meticulous examination. The murder weapon, a baseball bat adorned with the logo of the Florida Marlins, lay discarded near Vicky's lifeless body. Its wooden surface was stained with her blood, a grim reminder of the brutalities she had endured. Detective Reilly carefully collected the bat, hoping it would provide crucial clues to unravel this heinous crime. As the investigation unfolded, the police discovered that Vicky's personal life was far from ordinary. Rumors had swirled about her involvement with multiple men, including a married man and even a high school student. These revelations added a layer of complexity to the case, leaving the investigators to question whether her sex life played a role in her tragic demise. Detective Reilly and his team meticulously combed through Vicky's personal belongings, searching for any evidence that could shed light on her murder. They meticulously examined her phone records, revealing a series of cryptic messages and calls from unknown numbers. The investigators reached out to the phone company, hoping to trace the origins of these mysterious communications. Meanwhile, local media outlets began to take notice of the high-profile case. The community was gripped by fear, with residents locking their doors and looking over their shoulders, unsure if the killer lurked among them. As the investigation continued, Detective Reilly and his team tirelessly pursued every lead, determined to bring justice to Vicky and her grieving family. Their efforts would uncover a web of deceit, betrayal, and secrets that would shock the community to its core. Evelyn Traylene Goderby, a 63-year-old woman of Southern charm and impeccable manners, found herself at the center of the investigation into Vicky Davis Goderby's murder. Evelyn, known for her old money background and esteemed reputation, had always presented herself as a pillar of the community. However, beneath her polished exterior, a deep-seated resentment towards her daughter-in-law simmered. The motive for Evelyn's potential involvement in the crime stemmed from her concern for the family's legacy. Vicky's decision not to have children was seen as a threat to the Goderby name, a name that had long been associated with wealth and influence in Charleston, South Carolina. The tension between the two women had been building for months, with Evelyn feeling increasingly marginalized by Vicky's success and independence. As the police interrogated Evelyn, her emotions swung from anger to denial. She vehemently refuted any involvement in the murder, insisting that she had no reason to harm Vicky. However, the mounting evidence against her was difficult to ignore. Detective Sean "Trash Talk" Reilly, the lead investigator on the case, meticulously pieced together the puzzle. He discovered that Evelyn, a baseball fan, had been in possession of a baseball bat similar to the murder weapon. This discovery raised suspicions and pointed towards Evelyn's possible guilt. Furthermore, Reilly uncovered a series of anonymous letters sent to Vicky in the months leading up to her death. These letters contained veiled threats and warnings, suggesting that someone close to her had ill intentions. Handwriting analysis revealed similarities between the anonymous letters and Evelyn's own penmanship. The investigation took a dramatic turn when a neighbor recalled seeing Evelyn's convertible parked near Vicky's house on the day of the murder. This eyewitness account provided a crucial link between Evelyn and the crime scene. As the evidence stacked against her, Evelyn's facade of Southern charm began to crumble. The affluent neighborhoods of Charleston were left in a state of shock, grappling with the realization that darkness can lurk even within the most seemingly idyllic communities. As the investigation into the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby unfolded, the spotlight turned towards her husband, Greg Goderby, a successful patent lawyer. Greg, known for his charm and ambition, had always been deeply devoted to his family's reputation. However, the police began to uncover disturbing details that raised questions about his involvement in this heinous crime. One key point of contention was Vicky's decision not to have children. This had been a source of frequent arguments between the couple, leading investigators to explore whether it played a role in the motive behind the murder. The pressure to carry on the family legacy weighed heavily on Greg's shoulders, and it became evident that he saw Vicky's choice as a threat to their future. During the intense police interrogation, Greg's emotions ran high. His responses ranged from anger to defensiveness as he vehemently denied any involvement in his wife's murder. He insisted that he loved Vicky deeply and would never harm her. However, the detectives were not convinced and continued to dig deeper. One crucial piece of evidence that emerged was a series of text messages between Greg and an unidentified woman. These messages vaguely hinted at a secret affair, throwing a new twist into the investigation. The detectives painstakingly analyzed the messages, searching for any clues that could shed light on the motive behind Vicky's murder. Later, the case took a dramatic turn when a new witness came forward. A neighbor reported seeing a suspicious figure lurking near Vicky's house on the night of the murder. This crucial eyewitness account provided a glimmer of hope for the investigators, as it offered a potential break in the case. As the investigation continued, the detectives worked tirelessly to gather enough evidence to bring the killer to justice. The truth behind Vicky's murder remained elusive, but the pieces of the puzzle were slowly falling into place. The investigation into the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby took an unexpected turn when a crucial piece of evidence was unearthed. On a humid and sultry September afternoon, a beachcomber stumbled upon a hidden compartment concealed within a weathered wooden chest buried deep in the sand. To the beachcomber's surprise, the compartment contained a worn diary belonging to the late marketing executive. This diary, which had remained concealed for over 2 weeks, would prove to be a treasure trove of secrets and revelations. As the pages were carefully turned, the shocking truth unfolded before the eyes of the investigators. Vicky's diary chronicled a clandestine world of secret liaisons and forbidden desires, exposing a web of a dozen men Vicky was having sex with at the time of her death. The entries in the diary depicted a life far removed from the polished facade Vicky had presented to the world. Names were mentioned, many of them recognizable figures from the local community. The diary hinted at a married man, a deacon of a local megachurch, a high school student, several men at the local senior center, and even a prominent politician who had been a frequent visitor to the affluent neighborhoods of Charleston, South Carolina. The investigators were astounded by the breadth and audacity of Vicky's secret life. The diary entries painted a vivid picture of a woman who reveled in the thrill of forbidden relationships and outre sexual acts, seemingly unconcerned with the potential consequences. The revelations sent shockwaves through the community, with whispers and speculation spreading like wildfire. As the investigation continued, the police found themselves faced with a daunting task. The diary had opened up a multitude of new leads and suspects, each with their own potential motive for wanting Vicky silenced. The investigators meticulously combed through the diary's pages, cross-referencing names and dates with their existing evidence. The investigators knew that they were now on the brink of unraveling the truth, but little did they know the twists and turns that still lay ahead. In the gripping investigation into the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby, a shocking twist emerged that sent shockwaves through the affluent neighborhoods of Charleston, South Carolina in September of 1998. As the police dug deeper into the case, a new suspect emerged, casting doubt on the initial focus of the investigation. Amber Smythe, Vicky's envious secretary, became a person of interest due to her simmering resentment and a trail of secrets that led investigators down a twisted path. Amber, known for her sharp tongue and ruthless ambition, had long harbored jealousy towards Vicky's success and glamorous lifestyle. The police, determined to uncover the truth, delved into Amber's possible motives for murder. During the intense interrogation, Amber's anger and resentment towards Vicky were palpable. However, she vehemently denied any involvement in the crime. As the investigators pressed further, a startling revelation came to light. It was discovered that Amber, under the alias Vanessa Dracula, had been working as a call girl to make ends meet. This was not an uncommon choice. According to the American Center for Family Relationships, 40% of women in their 20s have turned to sex work for extra money. Even more shocking, one of her regular clients was none other than Greg Goderby, Vicky's husband. According to Amber, Greg was looking to have a child with her, then he would adopt the child to be his heir.
This revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. The police began to question the nature of Greg and Amber's relationship and whether it played a role in Vicky's untimely demise. Was Greg's involvement with Amber a motive for murder? Did Amber's jealousy and rage push her to commit such a heinous act? The police meticulously combed through phone records and interviewed witnesses, hoping to uncover the truth. They sought to piece together the puzzle of Vicky's secret sex life, her relationship with Greg, and the possible involvement of Amber. The case took on a life of its own, captivating the public's imagination and leaving them hungry for answers. In a shocking twist, the true identity of the murderer in the high-profile Charleston murder case was revealed. Evelyn Traylene Goderby, the unsuspecting mother-in-law of the victim, Vicky Davis Goderby, was arrested and charged with the brutal killing. This stunning revelation sent shockwaves through the community and left many questioning how such a tragic event could have unfolded. The motive behind this heinous act was uncovered during the course of the investigation. It appeared that Evelyn, driven by a toxic combination of jealousy, confusion, and pride for her son Greg, hatched a twisted plan to protect her family's reputation at all costs. On that fateful day in September of 1998, Evelyn, suffering from undiagnosed dementia, mistook Vicky for Amber Smythe, Vicky's secretary, part-time call girl, and her son's lover. In a moment of confusion and rage, Evelyn unleashed a brutal attack on Vicky, beating her to death with a Florida Marlins baseball bat. Sadly, this situation is not at all uncommon. According to the American Academy of Medicine and Criminal Justice, 18% of all murders in the U.S. are committed by someone with dementia. This tragic case of mistaken identity left investigators and the community reeling with disbelief. As news of Evelyn's arrest spread, the community was left grappling with a mix of relief and disbelief. The Goderby family, once regarded as pillars of the community, now finds themselves at the center of a scandal that has tarnished their reputation. The highly anticipated trial of Evelyn Traylene Goderby, the prime suspect in the murder of Vicky Davis Goderby, captivated the city of Charleston in October of 1999. District Attorney Lars Constable led the prosecution, while defense attorney Harry Huxtable fought to cast doubt on the evidence. The courtroom was packed with spectators, eager to witness the unfolding drama. The prosecution presented a compelling case against Evelyn, meticulously outlining the evidence that pointed to her guilt. They showcased the blood-stained baseball bat, the murder weapon that was found near the crime scene. Expert witnesses testified about the DNA analysis that linked Evelyn to the bat. The jury listened intently as the prosecution painted a vivid picture of a calculated and premeditated murder. The defense, on the other hand, sought to create doubt in the minds of the jurors. They questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence, suggesting that it could have been contaminated or mishandled. They also called witnesses who testified to Evelyn's character, painting her as a loving and caring mother who would never commit such a heinous act. The defense argued that the real killer was still at large and that Evelyn was being wrongfully accused. Throughout the trial, the victim's family sat in the courtroom, their emotions palpable. They endured the painful process of reliving their loss as the details of Vicky's brutal murder were recounted. The family's grief was compounded by the shocking revelation that the murder was a case of mistaken identity. Evelyn, suffering from dementia, had tragically killed Vicky, mistaking her for Amber Smythe, her son's lover. As the trial reached its climax, the jury retired to deliberate. The city held its breath, awaiting their decision. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions, with some expressing relief that justice had been served, while others questioned whether the death penalty was the appropriate punishment. In the end, the trial of Evelyn Goderby served as a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions. It left the city grappling with questions of justice and the complexities of the human psyche. In the aftermath of the trial, the lives of all those involved took unexpected turns. Evelyn Traylene Goderby, now incarcerated at the Charleston Correctional Facility, grappled with the consequences of her actions. The once prestigious Goderby family, known for their old-money Southern charm, was now tarnished by the dark cloud of murder. Their mansion, a symbol of wealth and privilege, stood empty and abandoned, a stark reminder of the tragedy that unfolded within its walls. Greg Goderby,
burdened by the weight of his mother's crimes, sought solace in therapy to confront his own demons. He struggled to come to terms with the fact that his own mother had taken the life of his wife. Vicky Davis Goderby, Greg, once a successful patent lawyer, found his career in shambles as his reputation became entangled with the scandals surrounding his family. He sought refuge in the arms of Amber Smythe, Vicky's former secretary and his secret lover. The two eventually married, had 3 children, and settled into a modest home in Helena, Montana, far removed from the southern opulence they once knew. The victim's family, devastated by the loss of their beloved Vicky, slowly began to rebuild their shattered lives. They found solace in the support of their community, who rallied around them during their darkest days. The local church held a memorial service in Vicky's honor, where friends and family gathered to share stories and memories of the vibrant young woman whose life was tragically cut short. The investigation and subsequent trial had left an indelible mark on the community of Charleston. The case had captivated the attention of the media, with newspapers and television stations covering every twist and turn of the trial. The local news station, WCBD Channel 2, dedicated a nightly segment to the trial, providing updates on the proceedings and interviews with key players in the case. The trial became the talk of the town, with residents discussing the latest developments over cups of coffee at the local diner, Joe's Cafe. As the years passed, the memory of Vicky Davis Goderby began to fade. The Charleston Correctional Facility, once a hub of activity during the trial, returned to its normal routine. The Goderby Mansion, now a mere relic of the past, stood as a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind closed doors. As we conclude this episode of True Crime Case Files, we reflect on the chilling plot that unfolded behind closed doors. The tragic murder of Vicky Davis Goderby revealed a tangled web of secrets and lies, leaving no one untouched by its devastating consequences. In a shocking twist, the truth behind Vicky's death unveiled a case of mistaken identity, driven by a combination of jealousy, pride, and the tragic effects of dementia. This case serves as a haunting reminder of the depths to which human nature can descend and the lasting impact it leaves on the lives of those involved. Albert Rizzi, a respected and hardworking man, was at the center of this shocking crime. At the age of 49, Albert held the esteemed position of bank manager at a local financial institution. Known for his unwavering dedication to his job, he had earned the admiration and respect of both his colleagues and friends. Albert's integrity and reliability had made him a pillar of the community. However, beneath the facade of professional success, Albert struggled with insecurities in his personal life, particularly within his marriage to Diana Rizzi. Their relationship had been on shaky ground for months, with rumors circulating among their close-knit circle of friends. These rumors of infidelity whispered through the town, leaving a trail of broken trust in their wake. Despite the outward appearance of a happy marriage, whispers of tension and discontent filled the air. As we delve deeper into the life of Albert Rizzi, we uncover a man haunted by the demons of his own making. Friends recall his frequent visits to local bars, seeking solace in the bottom of a glass. The strain of his failing marriage and mounting work pressure weighed heavily on his shoulders, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. The summer of 1982 was a tumultuous time in Carmel, Indiana. The town was abuzz with excitement over the upcoming Carmel Fest, an annual event that brought the community together in celebration. Amidst the cheerful atmosphere, a dark cloud loomed over the Rizzi household, casting a shadow on their once idyllic life. The murder of Albert Rizzi would send shockwaves through the town, leaving everyone questioning who could have committed such a heinous act. The quiet town of Carmel, Indiana, known for its picturesque neighborhoods and tight-knit community, would now be thrust into the spotlight. The residents, once feeling safe and secure, were now gripped by fear and uncertainty. Join us as we unravel the twisted web of secrets and lies that led to the tragic demise of Albert Rizzi. Stay tuned. We will delve deeper into the investigation and the shocking revelations that emerged. The tranquility of Carmel, Indiana's suburban neighborhood was shattered on the sunny morning of June 2, 1982, when a shocking and horrifying discovery was made. It was a day that would forever be etched in the memories of those who lived there. As the morning sun cast its warm glow over the neatly manicured lawns and picturesque houses, a neighbor, whose name we shall withhold for privacy reasons, went about their daily routine. Little did they know that this seemingly ordinary day would soon take a chilling turn. As they made their way towards Albert Rizzi's residence, a sense of unease began to creep in. Something felt amiss. Their heart raced, and a knot formed in their stomach. Upon reaching the front door, they hesitated for a moment, sensing an inexplicable foreboding. Summoning their courage, they entered the house, their footsteps echoing through the silent hallway. The air was heavy with an eerie stillness, broken only by the distant hum of a radio playing a popular tune from that summer. The neighbors' eyes darted around, searching for any signs of life. And then they saw it. In the dimly lit bedroom, bathed in the soft morning light filtering through the curtains, lay Albert Rizzi's lifeless body. The scene that unfolded before their eyes was straight out of a nightmare. The neighbors' heart pounded in their chest, their breath caught in their throat. Fear and panic washed over them like a tidal wave. They stumbled back, their minds struggling to comprehend the gruesome sight that lay before them. With trembling hands, they reached for their landline and dialed 911, their voice quivering as they informed the authorities of the horrifying discovery. Within minutes, the tranquil neighborhood was transformed into a hive of activity. Police cars, their sirens blaring, descended upon the scene. Yellow crime scene tape crisscrossed the area, marking it as a place of tragedy. Neighbors gathered in hushed clusters, their faces etched with shock and disbelief. The authorities swiftly responded to the distressing call from the quiet suburban neighborhood in Carmel, Indiana, on that sunny morning of June 2nd, 1982. Led by seasoned investigators, Detective Intrit and Officer Namazov, the police meticulously examined the crime scene where Albert Rizzi, a respected bank manager, had met his untimely demise. Upon entering the bedroom, the investigators were confronted with a haunting sight. The once pristine walls were now marred with splatters of blood, a chilling testament to the violence that had unfolded. The room itself seemed frozen in time, its atmosphere heavy with the weight of tragedy. Detective Intrit carefully surveyed the area, his experienced eyes honing in on every detail. He noted the position of the body, sprawled lifelessly on the floor, and the discarded gun nearby. The weapon, a .38 caliber revolver, had a distinct serial number etched onto its barrel. The detective made a mental note to cross-reference it with the local firearms database. Officer Namazov, armed with a camera, began meticulously documenting the scene. He captured close-up shots of the bloodstains on the walls, carefully noting their locations and patterns. Every angle was captured, ensuring that no crucial piece of evidence would be overlooked. The investigators knew the importance of thorough documentation in building a strong case. As the investigation progressed, the team discovered a few items of interest. A broken glass frame lay shattered on the floor, its remnants scattered around the room. Detective Intrit carefully collected the broken pieces, hoping to find fingerprints or other trace evidence. Nearby, a torn photograph caught Officer Namazov's attention. It depicted Albert and his wife Diana, smiling together at a local park. The torn edges suggested a possible struggle or argument. The investigators meticulously bagged and labeled each piece of evidence, ensuring a proper chain of custody. They knew that attention to detail was crucial, especially in a case that would undoubtedly attract media attention. The local newspapers, such as the Carmel Gazette, eagerly awaited updates on the investigation, and the police were determined to provide them with accurate information. The investigation had only just begun, and everyone knew that the road ahead would be filled with twists and turns. The investigation into the tragic murder of Albert Rizzi initially led to his wife, Diana Rizzi, as the prime suspect. Diana, a 43-year-old woman of elegance and sophistication, had long been dissatisfied with her marriage to Albert. Behind closed doors, she sought solace and excitement in the arms of her lover, Jason Mulholland. As police delved deeper into Diana's life, they discovered a web of deceit and betrayal. Her affair with Jason had been ongoing for months, unbeknownst to Albert. The clandestine meetings between Diana and Jason took place in various locations around Carmel, Indiana, adding an air of secrecy to their illicit relationship. During the course of the investigation, police uncovered a series of sexually explicit love letters exchanged between Diana and Jason. These letters, filled with graphic details of sex acts and promises of a future together,
shed light on the depth of their affair. They also found evidence of expensive gifts exchanged between the two lovers, including a gold necklace from Tiffany & Company, a popular jewelry store in June of 1982. When confronted with the evidence, Diana initially denied any involvement in her husband's murder. However, under the relentless questioning of the police, she eventually broke down and confessed to her role in the affair. She admitted to hating Albert, driven by her desire to be free from the constraints of her marriage, but not to the murder. Diana's confession of hatred and forbidden love sent shockwaves through the community, as the once respected wife and mother was revealed to be a cold-blooded adulteress. The media frenzy surrounding the case intensified, with headlines in local newspapers such as "Love Gone Wrong," "The Carmel Murder Scandal," and "Betrayal and Bloodshed." The dark side of suburbia. Our second suspect in the murder of Albert Rizzi was Jason Mulholland, a 21-year-old student at Ball State University. Jason, a charismatic young man with a penchant for adventure, found himself entangled in a web of love, deceit, and greed. Born and raised in the confining and very Midwestern surroundings of Muncie, Indiana, Jason was no stranger to the allure of the big city. He yearned for a life beyond the confines of his small-town upbringing, dreaming of fast cars, designer clothes, and the glamorous lifestyle he believed he deserved. It was this desire for wealth and luxury that drew him to Diana Rizzi, Albert's wife. Diana, a sophisticated and elegant woman, seemed to embody everything Jason desired. Her refined taste and impeccable style captivated him, and he saw in her an opportunity to escape the ordinary. Their clandestine affair provided a thrilling escape from the monotony of Jason's college life, a taste of the high society he craved. But as the investigation unfolded, the police began to uncover a darker side to Jason's involvement. Financial gain appeared to be a motivating factor in the murder of Albert Rizzi. The authorities discovered a series of incriminating messages exchanged between Jason and Diana, discussing their plans to inherit Albert's substantial fortune. As the police subjected Jason to intense interrogation, his facade of innocence began to crumble. During the interrogation, Jason's demeanor shifted from confident to nervous. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead as he struggled to maintain his composure. His voice trembled as he attempted to explain his involvement, each word laced with desperation. "I never intended for things to go this far," Jason confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was blinded by my own desires, and I let greed consume me, but I never wanted anyone to get hurt." The investigators pressed further, seeking to uncover the full extent of Jason's role in the murder. As they delved deeper into his background, they discovered a troubling pattern of reckless behavior and a disregard for the consequences of his actions. With mounting evidence against him, Jason's fate hung in the balance. As the investigation continued, the truth behind Albert Rizzi's murder slowly came to light. The police meticulously pieced together the puzzle, connecting the dots that would ultimately lead to justice. In the investigation into the murder of Albert Rizzi, the Carmel Police Department uncovered a significant breakthrough. On the morning of June 15, 1982, at approximately 9:30 a.m., Officer Roger Kraftwerk was conducting a routine search of the wooded area near the crime scene when he stumbled upon a discarded shoebox hidden beneath a dense thicket of bushes. The shoebox, weathered and worn, contained a trove of valuable evidence that could potentially shed light on the identity of the perpetrator. Inside, investigators found a series of handwritten letters, photographs, and a small, blood-stained diary. The contents of these items, meticulously preserved within the box, have opened up new avenues of inquiry for the dedicated detectives working tirelessly to solve this baffling case. The letters, addressed to an individual known only as A.R., appear to be written by someone deeply familiar with Albert Rizzi's personal life. The author's words, filled with a chilling mix of love and resentment, hint at a long-standing grudge and a desire for revenge. The photographs, capturing candid moments from Albert's life, provide a haunting glimpse into the past. Among them, a picture of Albert and his wife Diana, smiling together on their wedding day, now takes on a more sinister meaning. The blood-stained diary, belonging to Albert himself, contained cryptic entries that speak of a growing paranoia and fear. The final entry, dated just days before his untimely demise,
mentions an encounter with an unknown individual who threatened to expose a dark secret from Albert's past. Could this revelation be connected to his murder? The third suspect in the murder of Albert Rizzi was Carolina "Coco" Keeling, a 65-year-old neighbor residing in the quiet suburban neighborhood of Carmel, Indiana. Coco, known for her friendly demeanor and nosy nature, prided herself on being well-informed about the happenings in the community. However, behind her seemingly pleasant facade, Coco concealed a secret addiction to cocaine and a deep-seated jealousy towards the seemingly perfect marriage of Diana and Albert. As the police delved deeper into the investigation, suspicions arose regarding Coco's potential involvement in the heinous crime. Her close proximity to the Rizzi residence and her knowledge of the neighborhood's inner workings made her a person of interest. The police sought to uncover any hidden motives or connections between Coco and the victim. During the intense interrogation, Coco's demeanor shifted from friendly neighbor to a woman on edge. Her eyes darted nervously as she answered the investigators' questions. She claimed to have no knowledge of the events leading to Albert's murder, expressing shock and disbelief at the news of his untimely demise. However, the investigators were not easily swayed. They probed deeper, presenting Coco with evidence that contradicted her initial claims of innocence. They discovered that Coco had been seen in the vicinity of the Rizzi residence on the morning of June 2nd, the day Albert's lifeless body was discovered. Witnesses reported seeing Coco acting suspiciously, her usually friendly demeanor replaced with an air of unease. Furthermore, the police uncovered a series of phone calls between Coco and Diana in the days leading up to the murder. The content of these calls raised eyebrows, as they involved discussions about Albert's financial affairs and the possibility of a life insurance policy. The investigators suspected that Coco, driven by her addiction and jealousy, may have been entangled in a sinister plot to eliminate Albert for personal gain. As the interrogation intensified, Coco's initial denials began to crumble. She broke down, confessing to her involvement in the murder. Coco revealed that she had been manipulated by someone in the Rizzi family who promised her a share of the life insurance payout in exchange for her assistance. Overwhelmed by her addiction and fueled by envy, Coco succumbed to the cunning plan. The investigators, armed with this newfound information, were one step closer to unraveling the truth behind Albert Rizzi's murder. Their relentless pursuit of justice had led them down a twisted path where the veneer of suburban tranquility had been shattered by greed, addiction, and betrayal. In a shocking turn of events, the true identity of Albert Rizzi's murderer was uncovered by the diligent work of the police. It was none other than his own wife, Diana Rizzi, who emerged as the accused killer. The motive behind this heinous act was driven by a desire for freedom, passion, and financial security, all provided by Albert's life insurance policy. However, the truth took an even more sinister twist when it was revealed that Diana's own 16-year-old daughter, Sky Rizzi, was labeled as the actual mastermind behind the murder. Motivated by deep-seated feelings of neglect and resentment, Sky orchestrated her father's demise by psychologically manipulating her mother and her mother's lover, Jason Mulholland, a 21-year-old student at Ball State. Throughout the investigation, the police meticulously collected evidence, leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice. They discovered a trail of incriminating phone calls exchanged between Sky, Diana, and Jason, detailing their sinister intentions. Additionally, surveillance footage from a nearby convenience store captured the pair purchasing the murder weapon, a gun, just days before the crime took place. The police investigation uncovered a web of deceit and betrayal that had been carefully woven by this trio. Diana's and Jason's arrest left the community in a state of disbelief, as they struggled to comprehend how a seemingly devoted wife and mother could be capable of such a heinous act. The shockwaves reverberated through the quiet suburban neighborhood of Carmel, Indiana, where the Rizzi family had once resided. In the aftermath of this shocking revelation, the community of Carmel, Indiana, was left to heal and rebuild. The wounds inflicted by this tragic event would take time to mend, as the echoes of this true crime case would forever resonate within the hearts and minds of those who were touched by it. In the summer of 1982, the small town of Carmel, Indiana became the epicenter of a gripping murder trial that captivated the state of Indiana. The courtroom, adorned with its polished oak panels and imposing judge's bench, was transformed into a stage where justice would ultimately prevail. The prosecution, led by the tenacious district attorney, Eric Swift, presented a compelling case against Diana Rizzi, the accused murderer. With meticulous attention to detail, Eric Swift meticulously pieced together the evidence, revealing the depth of Diana's betrayal. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as he painted a vivid picture of her motive, a desire for freedom, passion, and financial security provided by her husband Albert's life insurance policy. The defense, represented by the seasoned attorney Elizabeth Holmes Narwhal, fought tooth and nail to establish doubt in the minds of the jury. Holmes Narwhal skillfully questioned the credibility of the prosecution's witnesses, highlighting inconsistencies in their testimonies. She argued that the evidence was circumstantial at best, and that Diana was being unfairly scapegoated for a crime she did not commit. As the trial progressed, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Witnesses took the stand, recounting their interactions with Diana, Skye, and Jason. The jury listened intently, their eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. The media, hungry for sensational stories, filled the courtroom benches, their pens scribbling furiously as they captured every twist and turn. After days of riveting testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. The nation held its breath as they weighed the evidence and deliberated on Diana's fate. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the jury returned with their verdict. Diana Rizzi was found guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers as the reality of the verdict sank in. Diana's face remained stoic, betraying no emotion. The judge, his voice filled with authority, pronounced the sentence: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the media frenzy subsided and the town slowly returned to its normal rhythm, Riverton was left to pick up the pieces. The impact of the trial reverberated through the community, forever altering the lives of those involved. Following the conclusion of the highly publicized trial, the lives of those involved were forever changed. Carolina Coco Keeling, the nosy neighbor who had harbored deep-seated jealousy towards the Rizzi family, found herself ostracized by the community. The revelation of her secret addiction to cocaine only intensified the disdain towards her. The local newspaper, the Indianapolis Gazette, ran a scathing exposé on Coco's double life, further tarnishing her already damaged reputation. She retreated from public view, seeking solace in the anonymity of her small apartment. Skye Rizzi, the 15-year-old daughter of the victim and the accused mastermind, faced a long and arduous road to redemption. Plagued by feelings of neglect and resentment, her involvement in her father's murder shocked the community to its core. The media frenzy surrounding the trial painted Skye as a troubled and misguided teenager. The local television station, Wish TV, aired a special report on the impact of the trial on Skye's life, delving into her troubled life and the psychological factors that led to her involvement in the crime. There were even rumors she would be played by Drew Barrymore in a made-for-TV movie. Skye was placed in a juvenile detention center where she underwent intensive therapy and counseling in an attempt to rehabilitate her. Jason Mulholland, the young lover of Diana Rizzi, faced a bleak future. His dreams of a luxurious lifestyle were shattered as he found himself behind bars. The local radio station, WFBQ-FM, covered Jason's sentencing, highlighting the role he played in the heinous crime. With his youthful charm now overshadowed by his criminal actions, Jason struggled to come to terms with the consequences of his choices. The loss of Albert Rizzi, a beloved member of the community, left a void that could never be filled. The local church, St. John's Episcopal Church, held a memorial service to honor Albert's memory, providing solace to his grieving family and friends. The community rallied around the Rizzi family, offering support and condolences during their time of need. As the months passed, the small town of Carmel, Indiana returned to its usual rhythm, but the scars of the tragedy remained. The impact of the events that unfolded in June of 1982 continued to reverberate through the lives of those involved, forever altering their paths. And so, the story of Albert Rizzi's murder comes to an end. In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Carmel, Indiana, the dark underbelly of seemingly idyllic lives was exposed. Love, betrayal, and a shocking twist left an indelible mark on all those involved. In the heart of Orlando, Florida, during the hot summer of July 2011, lived Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy, both 44, with their 3 children. Their life was not what most would consider typical. Evan served the community as a Unitarian minister, known for his engaging sermons and compassionate nature. Danielle, who was also a Unitarian minister, was a woman of ambition and adventure, always seeking new experiences. The Shaughnessy's were advocates for an open marriage, a lifestyle choice where partners agree it's acceptable to have sexual relationships outside of their marriage. This was symbolized by an upside-down pineapple sticker on their SUV, a symbol of the swinger lifestyle. They were open and proud of their lifestyle, hoping to foster a community built on the principles of sex and love without restrictions and acceptance of different ways of living. They were featured in a 2010 documentary called Love Unlimited: Polyamory in America, where they shared their experiences and beliefs about non-monogamy. They also ran a blog where they discussed topics such as spirituality, sexuality, and social justice. Their views on love and relationships made them stand out in Orlando, a city buzzing with life due to its attractions like Disney World and Universal Studios, which were drawing crowds eager to experience the new wizarding world of Harry Potter that had opened the previous year. Amidst this backdrop of fantasy and excitement, the Shaughnessy's pursued their dream of a progressive community. However, their unconventional life was not without its challenges. Evan and Danielle navigated the complexities of their open marriage while juggling responsibilities as parents and professionals. They were determined to live authentically, despite societal norms that often clashed with their values. As July 2011 unfolded, the Shaughnessy's found themselves at a crossroads, their lives entangled in a web of love, betrayal, and addiction. Their story is a stark reminder of the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility and the unforeseen consequences that can arise from pushing the boundaries of sexual relationships. On the evening of July 15, 2011, a horrific crime shattered the peace and tranquility of a suburban neighborhood in Orlando, Florida. The Shaughnessy family, known for their progressive and unconventional lifestyle, became the victims of a brutal and senseless murder. Their bodies were discovered by their 15-year-old daughter, Caitlin, who had just returned from a summer camp in North Carolina. She was greeted by a nightmarish scene of blood and carnage. As she walked into the living room, she was greeted by a scene of unimaginable horror. There, on the floor, lay the naked bodies of her parents, covered in blood and stab wounds. They had been viciously attacked by an unknown assailant who had inflicted multiple injuries on their chests, necks, and faces. The living room was a bloody mess, with furniture overturned and blood spattered on the walls and carpet. Caitlin was overcome with shock and terror as she realized that her parents were dead. She immediately called 911, sobbing and screaming for help. Her frantic voice was recorded by the dispatcher, who tried to calm her down and get more information. "My parents are dead. They're dead. There's blood everywhere. Please, 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 help me," Caitlin cried. The police and paramedics arrived within minutes, but it was too late to save the victims. Caitlin was taken to a nearby hospital, where she was treated for shock and trauma. She was later placed in the care of her aunt, who flew in from New York. The brutal slaying of the Shaughnessy couple sent shockwave through the Orlando community, especially among their friends and fellow members of the First Unitarian Church of Orlando. The couple, who had been married for 20 years, were described by their friends and family as loving, compassionate, and adventurous people who wanted to create a more inclusive and accepting world. They had no known enemies or conflicts, which made their murder even more baffling and disturbing. Who would want to kill them, and why? These were the questions that haunted the investigators, who would face a complex and challenging case. Within minutes of receiving the frantic 911 call on July 15, 2011 from Caitlin Shaughnessy, the Orlando Police Department dispatched a team of officers to the scene of the crime. The Shaughnessy home, located in the affluent Baldwin Park neighborhood, was cordoned off as a potential homicide site. The first responders, led by Detective Eugene Domingo, entered the house with caution, unsure of what they would find inside. What they witnessed was a scene of unimaginable horror. The living room, decorated with modern furniture and colorful artwork, was soaked with blood, the furniture overturned. On the floor, the corpses of Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy lay naked, their bodies riddled with multiple stab wounds. The couple, who had been married for 20 years, had been brutally murdered in their own home. The police quickly assessed the situation and called for backup and medical assistance. They also tried to comfort Caitlin, who was in a state of shock and trauma. She was taken to the Orlando Regional Medical Center, where she was treated for minor injuries and psychological distress. She was later joined by her aunt, who flew in from New York to take care of her. The investigators quickly searched for any signs of forced entry, robbery, or struggle, but found none. The house was in order, except for the bloody carnage in the living room. The murder weapon, a knife, was nowhere to be found. The only clue they had was a partial fingerprint found on the door handle, which they hoped would match someone in their database, along with a faint footprint on the carpet, possibly belonging to the killer. Detective Domingo was baffled by the motive and the identity of the murderer. Who would want to kill the Shaughnessy's, a well-liked and respected couple in the community? What was the reason behind this savage and senseless act of violence? They had no enemies or conflicts as far as anyone knew, which made their murder even more baffling and disturbing. The police vowed to find the killer and bring justice to the Shaughnessy family, who had lost two of their own in a senseless and savage act of violence. The police had a first suspect in their sights, Caitlin Shaughnessy, the 15-year-old daughter of Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy, the Unitarian ministers and open marriage advocates who were stabbed to death in their Orlando home on July 15, 2011. Caitlin, who had discovered her parents' bodies after returning from a summer camp in North Carolina, was the only person in the house at the time of the murder. She was also the one who called 911, alerting the authorities to the horrific crime. The police wondered if she had a motive to kill her parents, who had a history of inviting strangers into their bed for sex as part of their unconventional lifestyle. They also questioned her alibi, which was based on the testimony of her camp counselors and fellow campers. The police interrogated Caitlin, hoping to find cracks in her story or signs of guilt. Caitlin, however, maintained her innocence, insisting that she had nothing to do with her parents' deaths. She cooperated with the police, providing them with access to her phone, computer, and social media accounts. She also agreed to take a polygraph test, which she passed. Caitlin, who was in a state of shock and grief, expressed her anger and confusion at being accused of such a heinous act. She also broke down in tears as she mourned the loss of her beloved parents. She was supported by her aunt, Edwina, who flew in from New York to take care of her. She also received counseling and therapy as she tried to cope with the trauma and the stress of the investigation. Caitlin, who was a bright and cheerful girl, had her life turned upside down by the tragic events that unfolded. She was a sophomore at Lake Highland Preparatory School, where she was an honors student and a member of the drama club. She had a passion for music and theater and dreamed of becoming a Broadway star. Caitlin, who had no history of violence or mental illness, was a victim of a brutal crime that robbed her of her family and her innocence. She was also a suspect in a murder investigation that threatened to ruin her reputation and her future. The police turned their attention to Dominic and Allison Rothman, close friends of Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy and fellow practitioners of the open marriage lifestyle. The Rothmans, both in their 40s, were successful professionals and parents of two. Dominic was a lawyer and Allison was a real estate agent. They had met the Shaughnessy's at a swingers club in Orlando, where they had bonded over their shared interest in polyamory, the practice of having multiple consensual romantic and sexual relationships. The couples had become inseparable, spending weekends together, even going on vacations as a blended family. They had also appeared in the 2010 documentary Love Unlimited, Polyamory in America, where they had discussed their views and experiences on non-monogamy. The police interrogated the Rothmans, wondering if they had any motive or involvement in the brutal murders of their friends. They asked them about their whereabouts on the night of the crime, their relationship with the victims, and their knowledge of any enemies or threats. The Rothmans cooperated with the police, providing them with alibis, phone records, and testimonies from other witnesses. They also denied any role in the killings, expressing their shock and sorrow at the loss of their friends. They claimed that they had a loving and respectful romantic and sexual relationship with the Shaughnessy's, and that they had no reason to harm them. They also said that they were unaware of any conflicts or problems that the Shaughnessy's had with anyone else. The Rothmans, who had lived a harmonious yet unconventional life, saw their dreams shattered by the tragic events that unfolded. They were not only grieving for their friends, but also facing suspicion and scrutiny from the authorities, the media, and the public. They were also worried about the impact of the investigation on their children and their careers. The Rothmans, who had embraced a lifestyle of freedom and sexual exploration, found themselves trapped in a nightmare of violence and mystery. The mystery of the Shaughnessy murders took a dramatic turn on July 25, 2011, when the Orlando police, led by Detective Eugene Domingo, made a stunning discovery. In a remote wooded area, about a mile away from the Shaughnessy residence, they unearthed a knife that was covered in blood and dirt. The knife, a tin-inch chef's knife that had been purchased from a Walmart store in Orlando on July 14, 2011, the day before the murders, matched the description of the murder weapon given by the medical examiner. The knife had been used to inflict multiple stab wounds to the chest, neck, and face of Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy, the Unitarian ministers and open marriage advocates who had been killed in their home on July 15, 2011. The police seized the knife and sent it to the crime lab for analysis. The results confirmed their suspicions. The knife had traces of the victim's blood and DNA, as well as the DNA of another person. The police ran the DNA profile through their database, hoping to find a match. They hit the jackpot. The DNA belonged to Steve Ballywick, a 54-year-old man with a criminal record and a history of drug abuse. The police had a new person of interest in the case, and they wasted no time in tracking him down. The police had found a possible killer, and they had the proof to back it up. The discovery of the knife was a major breakthrough in the case, as it provided the police with a solid lead. But still, there were questions. How had Steve met the Shaughnessy's? Was it at a swingers club, and had he been invited to join them for a night of sex? Had he snapped and stabbed them to death in a drug-fueled frenzy? The police had a person of interest in their sights, Steve Ballywick, a 54-year-old man whose sedan was seen near the Shaughnessy residence on the night of the murder. Steve, an ex-felon with a troubled past and a history of drug abuse, became the prime suspect after his DNA was found on the knife that was used to kill Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy. The Unitarian ministers and open marriage advocates who were stabbed to death in their Orlando home on July 15, 2011. The police, led by Detective Eugene Domingo, tracked down Steve to a motel in Kissimmee, Florida, where he was staying in a room that contained more evidence of his involvement in the crime. The police surrounded the motel and knocked on the door of his room. Steve, who was high on bath salts at the time, opened the door and saw the police. He panicked and tried to run, but the police tackled him and arrested him. That night they interrogated him, trying to get him to confess and explain his motive. Steve, however, denied any involvement in the gruesome crime, claiming that he had never met the Shaughnessy's and that he had nothing to do with their deaths. He expressed his anger and frustration at being accused of such a heinous act, casting down on the authorities' suspicions. Steve, who had lived a life of addiction and crime, was facing the most serious question of his life. Had he killed the Shaughnessy's in a drug-fueled frenzy? The shocking truth behind the Shaughnessy murders was finally revealed. The killer was none other than Steve Ballywick, a 54-year-old man who had been high on bath salts, a dangerous synthetic drug that had been linked to several violent incidents in Florida and across the country. Bath salts, which mimic the effects of cocaine and methamphetamine, can cause paranoia, hallucinations, and aggression. Steve had met Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy, the Unitarian ministers and open marriage advocates, at a swingers club in Orlando, where they had invited him to join them for a night of sex at their home. Unbeknownst to them, Steve had taken bath salts before arriving at their house. In a drug-induced frenzy, he attacked them with a knife that he had bought from a Walmart store the day before. He stabbed them repeatedly, mutilating their faces and bodies. He then fled the scene, leaving behind a trail of blood and evidence. The police, who had been investigating the case for 10 days, found the knife buried in a nearby wooded area, where it had Steve's DNA and the victim's blood on it. They arrested him and searched his room, where they found more proof of his guilt: a receipt for the purchase of the knife, a pair of blood-stained jeans and shoes, and a bag of bath salts. Steve, who had a criminal record and a history of drug abuse, denied any involvement in the crime, claiming that he had never met the Shaughnessy's and that he had nothing to do with their deaths. He was lying, and the police had the DNA evidence to prove it. Steve, who had betrayed the trust of the Shaughnessy's and killed them in a drug-fueled rage, was facing 2 counts of first-degree murder and the wrath of an angry public, who were outraged and horrified by his actions they had seen on TV or online. The final chapter in the Shaughnessy murder case was written in a Florida courtroom, where the killer, Steve Ballywick, faced the consequences of his actions. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Miles Ocampo, a veteran of high-profile cases, presented a strong case against Ballywick, who had stabbed Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy to death in their Orlando home on July 15, 2011. Ocampo showed the jury the gruesome photos of the crime scene, the bloodstained knife that was used as the murder weapon, and the DNA evidence that linked Ballywick to the killings. He also played the 911 call made by the victim's daughter, Caitlin, who had discovered her parents' bodies, and the testimony of the police officers who had arrested Ballywick at a motel in Kissimmee, Florida, where he had been staying with a bag of bath salts, a synthetic drug that had been linked to several violent incidents in Florida and across the country. Ocampo portrayed Ballywick as a cold-blooded killer who had betrayed the trust of the Shaughnessy's, who had invited him to join them for a night of sex and had killed them in a drug-fueled frenzy. He asked the jury to deliver justice for the Shaughnessy family, who had suffered a devastating loss. The defense attorney, Mitchell Raimundo, a public defender who had taken on Ballywick's case, argued for a different verdict. He claimed that Ballywick was not guilty by reason of insanity and that he had been under the influence of bath salts, which had caused him to lose touch with reality and act impulsively. He said that Ballywick had a history of mental illness and drug abuse and that he needed treatment, not punishment. He appealed to the jury's compassion and understanding and asked them to spare Ballywick's life. The victim's family, who had been following the trial closely, watched as the jury deliberated for 2 hours before returning with their verdict. They found Ballywick guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a mix of emotions to the courtroom. Some felt that the verdict was too lenient and that Ballywick deserved the death penalty. Others felt that the verdict was fair and that Ballywick would pay for his crimes for the rest of his life. The impact of the verdict rippled through the lives of all involved, forever altering their perception of the world. The trial of Steve Ballywick, the bath salts killer who brutally murdered Evan and Danielle Shaughnessy, the Unitarian ministers and open marriage advocates, in their Orlando home on July 15, 2011, left a lasting impact on the lives of those who were touched by the tragedy. Caitlin Shaughnessy, the 15-year-old daughter of the victims, who had found their mutilated bodies, was traumatized by the horrific ordeal. She sought solace and therapy in the support of her extended family, who had long presumed her parents dead. She also received an outpouring of sympathy from the public, who donated over $100,000 to a fund set up by the Miami Herald to help her with her education and future. Dominic and Allison Rothman, the close friends of the Shaughnessy family and fellow proponents of the non-monogamous lifestyle, were scarred by the suspicion cast upon them by the police and the media. They distanced themselves from the open marriage scene, which had been growing in popularity in Florida and across the country. They focused on healing their own relationship and coping with the loss of their friends. The police, led by Detective Eugene Domingo, who had worked tirelessly to solve the case and bring the killer to justice, were forever marked by the horrors they witnessed. They continued their efforts to combat the rising threat of bath salts, a synthetic drug that had been linked to several violent incidents in Florida and across the country. They also praised the bravery and cooperation of the witnesses in the victim's family, who had helped them with the investigation. And the Shaughnessy family, who had been estranged from Evan and Danielle for years, were forever scarred by the loss of their loved ones. They found strength in their shared memories and the love that remained. They also learned to accept and respect the choices that Evan and Danielle had made and the legacy that they had left behind. In the affluent Orange County suburb of Mission Viejo, California, Kevin Ziegler, age 43, lived a life that many would envy. As a financial analyst, Ziegler had carved out a successful career for himself, a testament to his hard work and dedication. A graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, he had always shown a keen acumen for numbers and an ambition that propelled him from a humble beginning to the ranks of respected professionals in the financial sector. Ziegler's home life, on the surface, appeared equally fulfilling. Married to Olivia, a high school teacher with aspirations of authorship, the couple had 2 children and resided in a picturesque neighborhood emblematic of the American dream. They were often seen at local spots, enjoying the community's offerings, from the serene Lake Mission Viejo to the bustling shops at Mission Viejo, where the family could be spotted on weekends browsing through the latest releases at Barnes & Noble or enjoying a meal at one of the local eateries. In the days leading up to his untimely death in September 2003, Ziegler was reportedly working on a significant project at work, one that he believed could be a turning point in his career. According to colleagues, he had been putting in extra hours, fueled by the dream of one day becoming a financial director. His dedication was evident in his meticulous planning and the detailed presentations he was known for. However, beneath the facade of professional success and domestic bliss, there were rumblings of discontent. Friends and family hinted at tensions within the marriage, though few could have predicted the tragic outcome. In this period, the world was still reeling from the aftermath of the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster earlier in the year had cast a shadow over the nation. Yet, in the Ziegler household, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would end in a shocking and violent act. On the evening of September 15, 2003, the tranquility of Mission Viejo, a community renowned for its safety and high quality of life, was shattered. Kevin Ziegler, a 43-year-old financial analyst, was found dead in his garage, a victim of a point-blank shooting. The discovery was made by Mark Thompson, a neighbor and friend, who had ventured over in the fading light to return a borrowed lawnmower, an act reflecting the close-knit nature of the community. The weather that evening was uncharacteristically damp for Southern California, with a light rain that had begun to fall, casting a somber mood over the neighborhood. Thompson, upon finding Ziegler's body, was overcome with shock. His immediate reaction was to call 911, his voice shaking as he struggled to convey the gravity of the situation to the dispatcher. The dispatcher, trained for moments of crisis, worked to calm Thompson while simultaneously dispatching police and emergency services to the scene. Mission Viejo, part of Orange County, was known for its idyllic settings and had been featured in various media as a desirable place to live. The community, with its well-kept homes and manicured lawns, was a stark contrast to the crime scene that awaited the first responders. The Ziegler residence, a two-story home typical of the area's architecture, now bore the hallmarks of a tragedy. The community, which typically worried about mundane issues reported in the local Mission Viejo dispatch, such as city council decisions or school board meetings, was now the backdrop for a real-life crime drama, the likes of which were usually confined to the pages of the Los Angeles Times or the nightly news. Upon receiving the distress call on the evening of September 15, 2003, the Mission Viejo Police Department acted with immediate urgency. Detectives Sarah Gomez and Eric Miraflores, both with years of experience in the field of criminal investigation, were dispatched to the scene. Their arrival was prompt, a testament to the efficiency and dedication of the local law enforcement in maintaining the safety and security of this Orange County community. The scene that awaited Gomez and Miraflores was grim. Kevin Ziegler, a 43-year-old financial analyst known in the community for his professional success and active family life, lay dead in his own garage, a victim of a shooting at point-blank range. The garage, typically a mundane space filled with the trappings of suburban life such as sports equipment and gardening tools, had been transformed into a crime scene. The air, still heavy with the scent of rain from the earlier downpour, was now tinged with the metallic smell of blood. Detectives Gomez and Miraflores approached the investigation with a professional calmness, but the brutality of the crime was not lost on them. The crime scene was meticulously documented, with photographs taken and evidence collected. Among the items of interest were bullet casings and potential fingerprints, crucial pieces in the puzzle of who had committed this heinous act. The methodology of the investigation was thorough, reflecting advancements in forensic science that had been highlighted in media outlets such as CSI, a popular television show at the time that had brought forensic science into the living rooms of the American public. The detectives utilized a variety of tools and techniques, from dusting for fingerprints to canvassing the neighborhood for witnesses. Their goal was clear: to piece together the events leading to Kevin Ziegler's death and to bring the perpetrator to justice. In the days that followed, the community of Mission Viejo, typically concerned with the comings and goings reported in the local Mission Viejo dispatch or the broader issues covered by the Los Angeles Times, found itself at the center of a real-life investigation. The tranquility of the suburb had been disrupted, leaving residents to grapple with the reality of the crime among them. The investigation into Kevin Ziegler's murder swiftly turned its focus towards those closest to him, with Olivia Ziegler, his 41-year-old wife, emerging as suspect number one. Olivia, a high school teacher with aspirations beyond her classroom walls, had often spoken of her dream to pen a romance novel. Her life in the picturesque Orange County suburb of Mission Viejo, while seemingly idyllic, was under scrutiny as detectives delved into the intricacies of her marriage to Kevin. Olivia's interrogation was conducted with precision, reflecting the seasoned expertise of detectives Sarah Gomez and Eric Miraflores. The questioning took place against the backdrop of a community still reeling from the shock of the crime, a sentiment echoed in the somber tones of local media coverage. The Mission Viejo dispatch, along with regional news outlets, had begun to piece together the narrative of a troubled marriage, hinting at financial strains and personal grievances that may have motivated the crime. During the interrogation, Olivia's demeanor fluctuated between composed and visibly distressed. She vehemently denied any involvement in her husband's death, her voice firm yet tinged with emotion as she recounted the details of their life together. Her aspirations, once centered around literary success, were now overshadowed by the grim reality of her situation. The detectives probed Olivia's account, searching for inconsistencies or signs of deceit. The questioning, methodical in its approach, was reminiscent of the high-stakes interviews portrayed in popular crime dramas of the time, such as NBC's A Law and Order. The police sought to understand not just the facts, but the emotional undercurrents of Olivia's relationship with Kevin, believing that the motive for murder often lay hidden in the complexities of personal connections. As the interrogation unfolded, the community of Mission Viejo watched with bated breath, the case becoming a focal point of discussion. Neighbors and friends, once casual observers of the Ziegler's life, now found themselves questioning what they thought they knew about the family next door. As the investigation into Kevin Ziegler's murder deepened, attention shifted to Lana Henry, a 31-year-old real estate agent entangled in a secret sexual relationship with the victim. Lana, characterized by her ambition and independence, harbored dreams of establishing her own real estate empire in the competitive market of Southern California. Her involvement with Kevin, however, cast a shadow over her professional aspirations, drawing her into a narrative far removed from the glossy listings and upscale open houses that defined her career. The interrogation of Lana Henry was conducted with a keen awareness of the delicate balance between personal and professional lives in affluent communities like Mission Viejo. Detectives Gomez and Miraflores, leveraging their experience, navigated the questioning with a focus on uncovering motives rooted in jealousy or fear of loss. The backdrop of this interrogation was a society still grappling with scandals that dominated headlines in 2003, from corporate fraud to celebrity trials, reflecting a fascination with success and moral fallibility. Throughout the interrogation, Lana maintained a composed demeanor, her responses measured and deliberate. She articulated her shock and grief over Kevin's death, emphasizing her innocence and distancing herself from any motive for murder. Her calmness under scrutiny mirrored the poise expected of a successful real estate agent, accustomed to negotiating under pressure and managing perceptions. The police, in their questioning, sought to piece together Lana's whereabouts and interactions with Kevin in the days leading up to the murder, scrutinizing every detail for inconsistencies. As the investigation unfolded, the community of Mission Viejo, usually preoccupied with the serene lifestyle and local events reported in the Mission Viejo Dispatch, found itself at the heart of a mystery that echoed the dramatic narratives seen on national news. Lana Henry, once a figure synonymous with real estate success, was now a key player in a story that blurred the lines between personal tragedy and public spectacle. On a crisp morning on September 20, 2003, a pivotal breakthrough occurred in the investigation of Kevin Ziegler's murder. The serene suburb of Mission Viejo, typically bustling with the weekend activities of its affluent residents, became the focal point of a significant development. A local pawn shop, nestled among the array of businesses catering to the community's upscale clientele, reported a suspicious transaction that would alter the course of the investigation. The shop, known for its discreet dealings in high-end goods, had recently acquired a firearm that matched the description of the murder weapon. The seller, identified as David Forster, a 29-year-old personal trainer with aspirations of opening his own gym, was not typically associated with such transactions, raising immediate red flags for law enforcement. Detectives Sarah Gomez and Eric Miraflores responded with the urgency that had characterized their approach to the case. Their arrival at the pawn shop was swift, underscoring the gravity of the new evidence. The shop's surveillance footage provided them with clear images of Forster, adding a tangible lead to their investigation. This development, reminiscent of the plot twists often found in the crime dramas that dominated television in 2003, added a layer of complexity to the case. The discovery prompted a reevaluation of the relationships and motives surrounding Kevin Ziegler's murder. Forster, previously on the periphery of the investigation, was now a central figure. His connection to Olivia Ziegler, revealed through further probing, suggested a web of personal entanglements that could provide a motive for the crime. As the news of the breakthrough spread, the community of Mission Viejo, usually insulated from the kind of violence that grabs national headlines, found itself at the center of a narrative filled with intrigue and betrayal. The local media, including the Mission Viejo Dispatch, closely followed the developments, capturing the attention of residents who were unaccustomed to such disruptions in their peaceful enclave. With the investigation's focus shifting towards David Forster following the pawn shop revelation, the Mission Viejo Police Department intensified their efforts. David, a 29-year-old personal trainer with entrepreneurial dreams of starting his own fitness center, found himself under the harsh glare of the law. His illicit sexual relationship with Olivia Ziegler, once a private affair, became a critical element of the case, suggesting a complex motive rooted in personal connections and emotional entanglements. The interrogation of David Forster was conducted against a backdrop of increasing media attention. As details of the case emerged, local outlets like the Mission Viejo Dispatch and regional news sources began to draw parallels between this real-life drama and the intricate plots of popular crime shows which were captivating audiences in 2003. The community of Mission Viejo, typically more concerned with local events and lifestyle features, found itself at the center of a narrative that combined elements of passion, betrayal, and violence. During questioning, David's responses vacillated between moments of anger and profound despair, reflecting the emotional turmoil of being implicated in such a grave crime. His demeanor, at times defensive, provided investigators with insights into his psychological state and the nature of his relationship with Olivia. The interrogation process, meticulous in its execution, sought to unravel the sequence of events leading up to Kevin Ziegler's murder, with David's potential motive scrutinized under the lens of forensic evidence and behavioral analysis. As the case unfolded, the tranquil suburb of Mission Viejo became the backdrop for a story that resonated with themes of love, jealousy, and revenge, capturing the attention of a community unaccustomed to such disruptions. The investigation into David Forster's involvement, propelled by the discovery of new evidence, marked a turning point in the case, drawing connections between personal vendettas and the act of murder. As the investigation into Kevin Ziegler's murder progressed, the pieces of the puzzle began to coalesce, centering on David Forster as the perpetrator. A 29-year-old personal trainer with aspirations of opening his own gym, Forster's involvement in the crime was initially obscured by his peripheral presence in the victim's life. However, his relationship with Olivia Ziegler, the victim's wife, emerged as a critical axis around which the motive for the murder revolved. The revelation that Olivia had manipulated Forster with fabricated tales of abuse at the hands of her husband added a layer of complexity to the case. She painted a grim picture of her life with Kevin, alleging torture with knives and fire, thereby inciting Forster to commit the ultimate act of violence. This manipulation, rooted in deceit, highlighted the dark underbelly of personal relationships and the lengths to which individuals might go to extricate themselves from undesirable situations. Forster, driven by a misplaced sense of heroism and protective fervor, carried out the murder, shooting Kevin Ziegler point-blank upon his return home. This act of violence, executed with chilling precision, was the culmination of a series of manipulations and lies that blurred the lines between victim and perpetrator. The community of Mission Viejo, nestled in the heart of Orange County and typically insulated from the violent upheavals that grip other parts of the country, found itself grappling with the reality of a murder rooted in domestic discord. The case, with its twists and turns, bore resemblance to a soap opera or telenovela. However, for the residents of Mission Viejo, the murder of Kevin Ziegler was a stark reminder of the fragility of the veneer of suburban tranquility. As the investigation drew to a close, the motives and actions of David Forster and Olivia Ziegler were laid bare, revealing a tangled web of emotions and deceit that led to a tragic end. On the morning of September 25, 2003, the quiet streets of Mission Viejo were disrupted by the sound of police sirens as law enforcement moved to arrest David Forster, the man now identified as Kevin Ziegler's murderer. The arrest, conducted with the precision and seriousness characteristic of the Mission Viejo Police Department, marked a pivotal moment in a case that had gripped the community. David Forster, a 29-year-old personal trainer whose aspirations of opening his own gym had been overshadowed by his involvement in a deadly love triangle, was taken into custody without incident. His reaction to the arrest was one of surprise and resignation, as if the weight of his actions had finally settled upon him. Alongside Forster, Olivia Ziegler, the mastermind behind the tragic plot, was also arrested, her role as the instigator of her husband's murder now fully exposed. The reaction of Kevin Ziegler's family to the arrest was a complex mix of relief and profound grief. While justice was being served, it did little to fill the void left by Kevin's untimely death. The community, too, was left to grapple with the unsettling reality that such a heinous act could occur in their seemingly peaceful suburb. Local media outlets, including the Mission Viejo Dispatch, covered the arrest extensively, reflecting the shock and sadness felt by many. As the case moved towards trial, the actions and motivations of David Forster and Olivia Ziegler were scrutinized, offering a cautionary tale about the destructive power of deceit and manipulation. The arrest of the perpetrators brought a sense of closure to some, but for others, it was a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the complexity of human relationships. The trial of David Forster and Olivia Ziegler for the murder of Kevin Ziegler unfolded in a courtroom filled with tension, anticipation, and the heavy weight of grief. As the proceedings began, the prosecutor, Angie Hashimoto,
A seasoned attorney known for her meticulous preparation and unwavering commitment to justice, presented a compelling case against the defendants. Hart's argument painted a vivid picture of a premeditated murder, orchestrated by Olivia and executed by David, rooted in deception and betrayal. On the defense side, Michael Choi, a defense attorney with a reputation for his persuasive courtroom demeanor and strategic acumen, argued on behalf of Forster and Olivia. Evans sought to frame his client's actions within the context of emotional manipulation and psychological distress, suggesting that the complex dynamics of their relationships had clouded their judgment. The trial, closely followed by local media, echoed the public's fascination with true crime stories and real-life cases covered in the news. The community of Mission Viejo, still reeling from the shock of the murder in their midst, watched as the legal drama unfolded, bearing witness to the unraveling of a tragedy that had struck at the heart of their suburban tranquility. In the end, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for both David Forster and Olivia Ziegler, sentencing them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The verdict was met with mixed emotions, relief that justice had been served, but sorrow for the lives irrevocably changed by the crime. Kevin Ziegler's family, while grateful for the legal resolution, mourned the loss of a husband, father, and son, whose absence left a void no verdict could fill. The trial's conclusion marked the end of a chapter for the community of Mission Viejo, but the story of Kevin Ziegler's murder remained a somber reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the facade of a perfect life. In the aftermath of the trial that captivated the community of Mission Viejo, the lives of those involved in the case of Kevin Ziegler's murder began to slowly adjust to a new normal. The conviction and sentencing of David Forster and Olivia Ziegler to life without parole brought a sense of closure to a saga that had unfolded with the intensity of the crime dramas that were popular in the early 2000s, such as CSI and A Law and Order. Yet, the reality of the situation left a lasting impact on the community, a stark reminder of the fragility of trust and the depths of human complexity. Detectives Sarah Gomez and Eric Miraflores, who had been at the forefront of the investigation, continued their work with the Mission Viejo Police Department, their experience with the case adding a somber layer of wisdom to their approach to law enforcement. The case had not only tested their investigative skills, but also offered a poignant lesson in the unpredictable nature of human emotions and motivations. For the family of Kevin Ziegler, life moved forward amidst the shadow of loss. The void left by Kevin's untimely death remained, a painful reminder of the vibrant life that had been so abruptly taken. Yet, in their grief, they found strength in each other and in the support of a community that had rallied around them during their time of need. The community of Mission Viejo, known for its serene lifestyle and picturesque surroundings, had been shaken by the events that transpired. Local media, including the Mission Viejo Dispatch, which had closely followed the case, continued to reflect on the lessons learned and the questions raised about safety, trust, and the hidden turmoil that can exist behind closed doors. As the years passed, the case of Kevin Ziegler's murder remained a touchstone for discussions about crime and justice in suburban America. For those directly affected, the journey towards healing and understanding continued, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of tragedy. The tragic case of Kevin Ziegler reminds us of the dark complexities of human relationships and the devastating impact of deceit and betrayal. This episode of True Crime Case Files has explored the depths of love, jealousy, and ultimately murder in the quiet suburb of Mission Viejo. Julie Lewis was 18 years old. She lived in Payeth, Idaho, a small town known for its friendly people and beautiful landscapes. Julie was in her senior year of high school and was known for her beauty and intelligence. She dreamed of going to college and starting a new life away from the troubles she faced at home. Julie's life had been tough. Her mother died of cancer when Julie was only 14. This loss left a big hole in her life. Her father, Coney Lewis, was a police officer who worked long hours. Julie often felt lonely and started seeking the company of older men who could offer her the stability and comfort she missed. Some people thought Julie was manipulative, using her looks and charm to get what she wanted. Others believed she was just trying to survive in a world that had not been kind to her. In school, Julie was an honor roll student. Her friends described her as ambitious and determined, always talking about her plans for the future. She wanted to study business at the University of Idaho and one day own her own company. Julie's teachers saw her potential and often praised her hard work and dedication. In the days leading up to her death, Julie was busy preparing for her high school graduation. She bought a new dress for the occasion and was excited about the graduation ceremony. She talked to her friends about their plans for the summer. They planned to visit the local mall, go to the movies, and spend time at the nearby Snake River. Julie also had a part-time job at a local diner, where she saved up money for college. She was well-liked by her coworkers and customers for her friendly and outgoing personality. Despite her troubles, Julie tried to stay positive. She had a close-knit group of friends who supported her. They often hung out at local spots like the Payette Skate Park and the community swimming pool. Julie was also involved in her school's drama club, where she enjoyed acting and working behind the scenes. Julie's dreams were big, but her life was cut short. She had plans and ambitions, but she never got the chance to see them through. Her death shocked the small town of Payette, leaving everyone wondering what could have been. On the morning of June 5, 2012, Tony Lewis came home after his night shift as a police officer. Comey expected to find his daughter Julie still asleep. Instead, he found a horrifying scene. Julie's lifeless body was on the floor of her bedroom. The room was in disarray, with items scattered everywhere. Julie had been brutally attacked. She was bludgeoned with a rock from outside their home and then strangled with a belt. Tony was shocked and devastated. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Fighting through his grief and panic, Tony called 911 to report the crime. His voice trembled as he told the dispatcher what had happened. Despite his training and experience as a police officer, nothing could have prepared him for this. The news of Julie's murder spread quickly through the small town of Payette. Payette hadn't seen a murder in over 20 years, and the community was in shock. Julie was well known and liked by many. Her death was a terrible blow to the town. When the first responders arrived, they found Tommy outside, distraught and in tears. The sight inside Julie's room was gruesome. Blood was spattered on the walls, and the signs of a struggle were clear. Julie's face was bruised, and there were ulcers around her neck from the belt used to strangle her. The rock used in the attack lay nearby, covered in blood. The paramedics pronounced Julie dead at the scene. Tony could only watch in despair as they did their job. He was overwhelmed with grief, unable to comprehend how someone could do this to his daughter. Neighbors started to gather outside the Lewis home, drawn by the flashing lights of the police cars and ambulances. They whispered among themselves, trying to understand what had happened. Reporters from local news outlets soon arrived, their cameras and microphones capturing the tragic scene. They interviewed some of the neighbors, who spoke of their shock and sadness. Julie's friends and classmates were devastated by the news. Many of them had seen her just the day before at school, laughing and talking about their future plans. Now those plans would never come true. The school counselors were brought in to help the students cope with their grief. The entire town mourned the loss of a bright, young life taken too soon. The police arrived quickly at the Lewis home on the morning of June 5, 2012. Leading the investigation was Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts, a seasoned investigator known for her thoroughness and dedication. She had solved many tough cases in her career and was determined to find justice for Julie. The crime scene was horrific. Julie's bedroom was in chaos, with items strewn everywhere. Blood spattered the walls and signs of a violent struggle were evident. Julie's body lay on the floor, her face bruised and neck, marked from the belt used to strangle her. The rock used to bludgeon her lay nearby, covered in blood. Detective Roberts and her team began their meticulous work. Detective Roberts, along with Officer Olson Benson, a local officer with 15 years on the force, started by securing the area to prevent contamination of evidence. They took photos of the entire scene, capturing every detail. They used luminol to detect any hidden bloodstains and collected fingerprints from various surfaces. The investigators also bagged the rock and belt as key pieces of evidence. Detective Roberts noticed several things right away. The window in Julie's room was slightly open, suggesting someone might have entered or exited through it. There were scratches on the windowsill, possibly from the killer climbing in or out. Outside, footprints in the garden soil indicated someone had recently been there. The team interviewed Tony Lewis, who was still in shock. He recounted finding Julie and calling 911. His grief was palpable, and Detective Roberts felt his pain as a father. Despite his emotional state, Tony provided all the information he could, hoping it would help catch his daughter's killer. The local news outlets, including the Payette Times, covered the story extensively. Reporters interviewed residents and followed every development closely. The town was gripped by fear and sadness, unable to believe such a brutal crime could happen in their peaceful community. As the investigation continued, Detective Roberts and her team worked tirelessly. They analyzed the evidence collected, hoping to find clues that would lead them to the murderer.
They checked for any connections Julie might have had with known criminals and looked into her recent activities. The community's support for the police was strong. People brought food and coffee to the officers working long hours. Local businesses put up posters offering rewards for information leading to the arrest of Julie's killer. The town of Payette, once quiet and serene, now united in their quest for justice. The first suspect the police investigated was Harold Henderson. Harold, aged 70, was a retired used car salesman who lived in Payette. He was well known in the town for his flashy personality and competitive nature. Despite his age, Harold had a reputation for being charming and wealthy, making him popular in the local social scene. He was a widower, living alone in a large house filled with memorabilia from his younger days. Harold's connection to Julie Lewis came to light quickly. It was discovered that he had been romantically involved with Julie. Some residents of Payette knew about their relationship and whispered about the odd pairing. Harold's interest in Julie raised eyebrows, but in a small town, people often keep secrets. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson brought Harold in for questioning on June 6, 2012. They wanted to understand the nature of his relationship with Julie and determine if he had a motive for her murder. Harold arrived at the police station dressed neatly, his demeanor calm but slightly defensive. During the interrogation, Harold admitted to his relationship with Julie but denied any involvement in her death. He claimed they had a consensual sexual relationship, started only after she turned 18, and that he cared deeply for her. However, Harold's competitive streak, especially with his twin brother Alan, suggested a possible motive. Harold and Alan had a long history of rivalry, and both had been vying for Julie's attention. Harold's calm and confident demeanor began to waver as Detective Roberts pressed him on his whereabouts on the night of the murder. Harold stated he was at home, watching a rerun of NCIS on CBS. He insisted he had no reason to harm Julie and was shocked by her death. However, his answers were vague, and he couldn't provide a solid alibi. The police also investigated Harold's financial records. They found that he had been giving Julie money regularly, which could have been a source of tension if he discovered she was manipulating him. Harold's phone records showed multiple calls and messages to Julie in the days leading up to her death, indicating frequent communication. Despite his denials, the police felt Harold had the motive and opportunity to commit the crime. His history of competitiveness with Alan and his romantic involvement with Julie painted a troubling picture. The investigators kept a close eye on Harold, looking for any inconsistencies in his story and waiting for any evidence that might link him directly to the murder. As the investigation continued, Harold remained a prime suspect. His flamboyant personality and competitive nature, coupled with his involvement with Julie, made him a central figure in the case. The town of Payette watched closely as the police worked to uncover the truth behind Julie's tragic death. The second suspect in the investigation was Alan Henderson, Harold's twin brother. Alan, also 70 years old, was a retired high school history teacher. Known for his intellect and passion for teaching, Alan was respected and well-liked in Payette. He had a reputation for being level-headed and scholarly, a stark contrast to his more flamboyant brother. Alan had never married and was often seen as a bachelor who enjoyed his solitude. He spent much of his time reading and participating in community events. Despite his age, Alan had a magnetic personality that attracted people of all ages. He was particularly fond of attending local book clubs and giving lectures at the town library. The police discovered that Alan, like his brother, had also been romantically involved with Julie Lewis. This revelation shocked many in the town, as Alan was viewed as a more reserved and dignified figure. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson brought Alan in for questioning on June 7, 2012, to understand his relationship with Julie and his potential motives. Alan arrived at the police station looking composed, dressed in a tweed jacket that hinted at his scholarly background. During the interrogation, he admitted to his relationship with Julie, but insisted it was platonic. He explained that he enjoyed her company and found her bright and ambitious. Alan's affection for Julie was evident, but he denied any romantic involvement. Detective Roberts pressed Alan about his whereabouts on the night of Julie's murder. Alan stated he was at home, working on a lecture for the local historical society. He mentioned reading a book about the Civil War, a topic he was passionate about. However, his alibi was weak, as he lived alone and had no witnesses to confirm his story. Alan's demeanor during the interrogation was calm but saddened. He expressed disbelief that Julie could be dead. He cooperated fully with the police, providing them with his phone records and access to his home. The investigators found nothing suspicious at his residence, but they continued to scrutinize his interactions with Julie. The police also interviewed people who knew Alan. His colleagues and former students spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated teacher who cared deeply about education. Despite his calm exterior, the possibility of betrayal by Julie could have triggered a strong emotional response. As the investigation progressed, Alan remained a key suspect. His scholarly nature and apparent innocence contrasted sharply with the dark motives uncovered. The police continued to explore every lead, determined to uncover the truth behind Julie's murder and the Henderson brothers' involvement. The third suspect in Julie Lewis' murder investigation was her father, Tony Lewis. Tony, 45, was a police officer in Payette, Idaho. Known for his protective nature, Tony was a well-liked figure in the community. He had become close to the Henderson brothers over the years, often acting as a mediator between the two. Tony's connection to Julie was evident, as he was her father and lived next door to Alan Henderson. The police had to consider every possibility, even the uncomfortable one that Tony might be involved. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts and Officer Olson Benson decided to question Tony on June 8, 2012. Tony was still reeling from the shock of finding his daughter's body. When he arrived at the police station, he looked tired and grief-stricken. During the interrogation, Tony recounted his actions on the night of the murder. He had been working a night shift, which he often did to provide for Julie after the death of her mother. Tony insisted he had no reason to harm his daughter and was devastated by her death. Detective Roberts asked Tony about his relationship with the Henderson brothers. Tony admitted he knew about their interest in Julie and had tried to keep the peace between them. He expressed his frustration over their rivalry, which had caused tension in the neighborhood. Despite this, Tony was adamant that he had no involvement in the crime. The police looked into Tony's background and found no history of violence or misconduct. His colleagues at the police department spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated officer and loving father. However, the investigators had to consider the possibility that Tony's protective instincts might have driven him to a breaking point. Tony provided his phone records and cooperated fully with the investigation. The record showed he had been on duty at the time of the murder, but the police needed to verify this alibi thoroughly. They checked surveillance footage from the police station and confirmed Tony's presence there during the critical hours. The police also interviewed neighbors and friends of Tony. Most described him as a caring father who was deeply affected by his wife's death and determined to give Julie a better life. Some, however, mentioned that Tony had become more stressed and irritable in recent months, possibly due to the pressure of raising a teenager alone. Despite Tony's grief and cooperation, the police had to keep all possibilities open. His close proximity to the crime scene and his protective nature were significant factors in the investigation. Detective Roberts and her team continued to examine every piece of evidence, knowing that solving the case required looking at every angle, no matter how painful. As the investigation unfolded, Tony remained under scrutiny. The small town of Payette watched closely, hoping for answers and justice for Julie. The police were determined to find the truth, and Tony's involvement, if any, would be uncovered through their relentless efforts. On June 10, 2012, around 3:00 p.m., new evidence came to light. The weather was warm and sunny, typical for Payette in early summer. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts received a call from a local hiker who had found something unusual near the Snake River. He had been walking his dog when he noticed a small bag hidden under some rocks. Detective Roberts and Officer Olson Benson rushed to the scene. They found a small black bag containing a blood-stained shirt and a pair of gloves. The items were immediately taken into evidence. The police believed these items could be crucial in solving Julie's murder. Back at the station, the forensic team examined the evidence. The blood on the shirt matched Julie's. This was a significant breakthrough. The gloves were tested for fingerprints, and the results came back with a match to Harold Henderson. This finding shifted the focus back to Harold, who had previously denied being near the crime scene. Detective Roberts and her team re-examined Harold's alibi. They discovered inconsistencies in his story. Further analysis of his phone records showed he had been near Julie's house at the time of the murder, contradicting his claim of being at home watching TV. The new evidence prompted the police to search Harold's home again. This time, they found a hidden compartment in his garage with several items that raised suspicion, including a second pair of gloves and a belt similar to the one used to strangle Julie. These discoveries painted a clearer picture of Harold's involvement. As the investigation deepened, the police interviewed more witnesses. They found out that Harold had been seen arguing with Julie the day before her death. A neighbor, Mrs. Carter, reported hearing raised voices and seeing Harold leave Julie's house looking angry. With the new evidence, Detective Roberts felt confident they were closing in on the truth. The police brought Harold in for another round of questioning. This time, his demeanor was less confident. Confronted with the evidence, Harold became defensive and struggled to maintain his earlier calmness. The forensic team continued to analyze the evidence, looking for any additional clues. They used advanced techniques like DNA testing and fiber analysis to ensure nothing was overlooked. The detailed investigation paid off, as more links between Harold and the crime were uncovered. By the end of the week, the police were confident they had enough evidence to make an arrest. The discovery of the bag near the Snake River had been the breakthrough they needed. The town of Payette waited anxiously for justice to be served. On June 12, 2012, the police were ready to make an arrest. Detective Kelly Breezy Roberts had pieced together the evidence pointing to Harold Henderson as the murderer. Harold, 70, was a retired used car salesman known for his flamboyant personality and competitive nature. His charm and wealth made him a popular figure in Payette, but his rivalry with his twin brother Alan and romantic involvement with Julie Lewis revealed a darker side. Harold had been competing with Alan for Julie's affection. He had given Julie money regularly and felt betrayed when he discovered her plan to blackmail him and Alan. On the night of June 4, Harold confronted Julie at her home. The argument turned violent, leading Harold to bludgeon her with a rock he found outside and strangle her with a belt. Driven by anger and betrayal, Harold committed the brutal murder. Detective Roberts had discovered inconsistencies in Harold's alibi and found crucial evidence, like the blood-stained shirt and gloves, linking him to the crime. The DNA and fingerprints on the gloves match Harold's, and the blood on the shirt was Julie's. Surveillance footage also placed Harold near Julie's house at the time of the murder. On the morning of June 12, Detective Roberts and Officer Olson Benson went to Harold's house to arrest him. They arrived at 9:00 a.m., and Harold was at home. When they told him he was under arrest for Julie's murder, Harold looked shocked but didn't resist. He was handcuffed and taken to the police station. At the station, Harold was formally charged with murder. His reaction was one of disbelief and anger. He insisted he was innocent, claiming the evidence was planted. Despite his protests, the overwhelming evidence convinced the police of his guilt. Julie's father, Tony Lewis, was informed about the arrest. He was devastated but relieved that the police had found the person responsible for his daughter's death. The town of Payette, which had been closely following the investigation, felt a mix of shock and relief. They couldn't believe someone they knew so well could commit such a heinous crime. As Harold was taken into custody, the town hoped for justice for Julie. Her friends and family gathered to support each other, remembering Julie for her beauty, intelligence, and dreams of a better future. The arrest brought some closure, but the pain of losing Julie would remain with them forever. The evidence against Harold was strong, and the police were confident they had the right person. The case now moved to the courts, where Harold would face trial for his actions. The community waited anxiously for the trial, hoping for a verdict that would bring justice for Julie. Harold Henderson's trial began on July 15, 2012, in Payette County Court. The courtroom was filled with Julie Lewis' family and local residents eager to see justice served. The case received extensive coverage from local news outlets, including the Payette Times and KTVB Channel 7, which kept the community updated on the trial's progress. The prosecutor, Emily Hackle Matchwork, 38, was known for her strong courtroom presence and dedication to seeking justice. Hackle Matchwork argued that Harold Henderson was guilty of brutally murdering Julie Lewis. She presented a clear case, showing evidence such as the blood-stained shirt and gloves found near the Snake River, Harold's fingerprints on the murder weapon, and surveillance footage placing him at Julie's house on the night of the crime. Hackle Matchwork described the crime as an act of rage and betrayal, emphasizing how Harold's rivalry with his twin brother and his manipulative behavior towards Julie led to her tragic death. The defense attorney, Drew Nils, 45, was a respected lawyer with a reputation for defending high-profile cases. Nils argued that the evidence against Harold was circumstantial and that his client was being falsely accused. He suggested that Harold's emotional state and previous arguments with Julie did not prove guilt. Mills attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's evidence, arguing that it was possible someone else could have committed the murder. Julie's family attended the trial every day. Her father, Tony Lewis, appeared exhausted but resolute. He was seen comforting Julie's friends and family, who were deeply affected by the trial. The emotional weight of the case was evident as testimonies about Julie's life and dreams were presented in court. After several weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated and reached a verdict on August 5, 2012. Harold Henderson was found guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict was met with a mixture of relief and sorrow from the courtroom. Julie's family, while devastated by her loss, felt the sense of justice had been achieved. Sentencing took place on August 12, 2012. Harold was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge, Honorable David Thompson, stated that the crime was particularly heinous due to its brutality and the betrayal involved. The sentence was seen by many as a fitting punishment for the crime. The trial's conclusion had a profound impact on the community. Payette, a town that had not seen such a violent crime in years, was left to heal. Julie's friends and family continued to honor her memory, focusing on her dreams and aspirations rather than the tragic end of her life. The case served as a stark reminder of the impact of violence and the importance of justice in a close-knit community. After Harold Henderson's trial and sentencing, life in Payette, Idaho, began to slowly return to normal. The town had been deeply affected by Julie Lewis' murder and the dramatic court case that followed. Payette, known for its close-knit community and small-town charm, was shaken by the violence and the betrayal that came to light. Julie's father, Tony Lewis, continued to cope with the loss of his daughter. He took a leave of absence from his job as a police officer to focus on his grief and to support Julie's memory. Tony began speaking at local schools about the importance of communication and the dangers of manipulation, hoping to prevent similar tragedies in the future. His efforts were met with support from the community, who admired his strength and resilience. Harold Henderson's life took a dramatic turn after his conviction. He was transferred to the Idaho State Penitentiary, where he began serving his life sentence. Harold's high-profile case and the nature of his crime made him a notable inmate, but he kept a low profile in prison. His flamboyant personality and competitive nature were replaced by a more subdued and reflective demeanor. The prison system provided Harold with counseling, but it did little to ease the weight of his actions. Alan Henderson, Harold's twin brother, also had to deal with the aftermath. Though he was cleared of any involvement in Julie's murder, the case had taken a toll on him emotionally. Alan withdrew from the social scene and focused on personal reflection. He continued to live in Payette, where he was known for his quiet and reserved nature. The community remained supportive of Alan, understanding that he had been a victim of his brother's actions as much as Julie's family had been. As time passed, Payette slowly moved forward. The town's recovery was marked by a sense of healing and unity, with residents coming together to support one another. The memory of Julie Lewis lived on through the scholarship and charity events, reminding everyone of her life and the impact of her tragic death.